Hey friends! Glad you're here at Marvel Harry. We've cooked up something special. What if Captain Marvel found baby Harry in space and binary energy made him most powerful wizard ever? Liking and subscribing really helps us out. Okay, story time. Chapter 1, Starfall. The killing curse was green. Everyone who had ever seen it described it that way, that specific, horrible green, the color of something that had no business existing in the natural world. It wasn't the green of grass or leaves or anything that grew. It was the green of endings. Of finality. Of a door slamming shut on everything that had ever been and ever would be. It left Voldemort's wand at 11:43 on the night of October 31st, 1981, and it crossed the 12 feet between him and the crib in the nursery of a small house in Godric's Hollow in approximately no time at all. What happened next? No one, not Dumbledore, not the unspeakables who would later spend years arguing about it in the deepest sublevels of the Ministry, not even the universe itself, had any framework to explain. Lily Potter was already dead on the floor downstairs. But love, it turns out, doesn't stop working just because the person who felt it has stopped breathing. It lingers. It saturates. 15 months of it, poured into every feeding and every lullaby and every time she'd pressed her lips to the top of her son's dark, wild hair and thought, with the fierce and ordinary certainty of a mother, not him, never him. 15 months of Lily Evans Potter loving her son with the specific and terrifying intensity of someone who had already lost too much and refused to lose this. It had soaked into the walls, into the floorboards, into the very air of that nursery. Into the boy himself. The curse hit the boy and the love hit the curse, and the universe hiccuped. That was the only word for it. A hiccup. A tiny, catastrophic misfire in the machinery of reality, the kind that happens maybe once in 10 billion years when something ancient and immovable, a law of magic older than language, collides at full force with something equally ancient and equally immovable, and neither one is willing to give way. The spell shattered. Voldemort's body came apart like wet paper in a storm. The house groaned and cracked and the nursery ceiling caved in, leaving a ragged hole open to the October sky. And the boy who should have died, the boy who should have been left in the rubble for Sirius Black or Hagrid or anyone to find, the boy flew up. Not gracefully. Not with intention. Just up, the way anything does when an explosion underneath it has nowhere else to direct its force. Up through the hole in the ceiling. Up past the chimney and the rooftop. Up past the confused owl that had been circling the house for the last 20 minutes with a letter clutched in its talons. Up past the low clouds, past the high clouds, past the place where clouds stopped and the air thinned and the stars began. Harry Potter, 14 months old, wrapped in a pale blue blanket with tiny golden snitches on it that Lily had charmed to actually move, flew up into the night sky. He wasn't frightened. That was perhaps the strangest part. He was cold, and then he was very cold, and then he was in a place so far beyond cold that the concept stopped applying, and at some point during this sequence of events the thin membrane of reality that separated Earth's dimension from the vast and indifferent cosmic architecture beyond it simply tore, just a little, just enough, and the boy passed through like a hand pushing through a soap bubble, and then there was no cold at all, and there was no Earth, and there was only the stars. He thought they were quite nice. He fell asleep before he traveled very far, which was probably for the best. Carol Danvers had been flying for 6 hours straight when the sensors in her suit pinged. She was 300,000 miles from the edge of the Palma Nebula, running escort for a Skrull refugee transport that had been tagged by a Kree patrol drone 2 systems back. The patrol had peeled off an hour ago, which was suspicious enough on its own, but Carol had other things to occupy her attention, specifically the fact that Talos was arguing with her through the comlink about the fastest route to the rendezvous point, and he was wrong, and she was telling him he was wrong, and he was explaining at considerable length why she was the one who was wrong. The Vela corridor adds 4 hours, she said, for the 3rd time. The Vela corridor avoids the Kree listening post at Talos. I am the Kree listening post's worst nightmare. Taking the long way around because they might spot us is like, it's like, she searched for an analogy. It's like hiding from a thunderstorm because you're scared of getting wet. When you are the thunderstorm. There was a pause on the comm. She could hear him thinking. That metaphor made no sense, he said. It made perfect sense. A thunderstorm cannot be afraid of, the sensor pinged again. Sharper this time. Insistent. Carol held up a hand, an entirely useless gesture since Talos couldn't see her, and focused on the readout blooming to life in the periphery of her suit's vision. It wasn't Kree. It wasn't Skrull. It wasn't any propulsion signature she recognized, and she recognized most of them. It was something small, very small, moving at a speed that should have been physically impossible given the complete absence of any detectable propulsion. It was tumbling, not flying. It was warm. It was, she tilted in the void, recalibrating, not quite believing the number coming back at her. It was alive. Talos, she said. Hold the transport. I've got something. What kind of something? Small. Organic. No ship. She was already moving, cutting through the dark toward the signal's origin point, binary light gathering at her hands in case this was some kind of trap, some Kree bait switch with a very convincing living lure. Give me 2 minutes. She found it in 40 seconds. The thing drifting in the void was a baby. Carol Danvers had seen most of what the universe had to offer in terms of startling experiences. She had punched a hole through a Kree warship's hull. She had dragged a disabled freighter 12 parsecs on her own because the crew had 3 children aboard and she wasn't leaving them. She had once talked an entire war to a standstill through a combination of tactical positioning and genuinely impressive volume. But she hovered in the dark of space for a solid 4 seconds, staring at the small blue-blanketed infant tumbling slowly end over end in the vacuum, and her brain produced absolutely nothing useful. Then it produced, that's a baby. And then, that baby is glowing. It was faint, she might have missed it if she hadn't been looking directly at him. A soft, shifting luminescence beneath his skin, not unlike her own binary light but different in a way she couldn't quantify. Where her energy was golden white and ran hot, this was something older feeling. Earthier. Like bioluminescence in deep ocean water, she thought, which was not a comparison she'd expected to reach for out here. She closed the distance in 3 seconds and caught him before she'd fully decided to do it, one hand curving under his head the way, she was faintly startled to discover, some instinct she hadn't known she possessed apparently required. The baby didn't wake up. He didn't respond at all except to make a small sound, somewhere between a sigh and a hum, and the glow under his skin pulsed once, warm and steady, like a heartbeat. Carol's binary energy flared in response. Not defensively. Responsively. Like a greeting. She looked down at the tiny face, dark hair a complete catastrophe, small pointed chin, a mark on his forehead she couldn't make out clearly beneath the blanket's shadow, and said, to no one in particular, okay. What are you? The baby slept on, entirely unbothered by the question. Talos' voice crackled through the comm, Captain. What did you find? Carol looked up at the transport in the middle distance, then back down at the impossibly warm, impossibly alive, faintly glowing infant in her arms, who was currently gripping one of her fingers with a strength that seemed wildly disproportionate for something this size. A complication, she said. Nick Fury looked at the readouts for a very long time without speaking. This was unusual. Fury had opinions about most things, delivered them promptly, and expected the universe to adjust accordingly. The silence stretched across the small medical bay of the Protector while the ship's bioscanner beeped softly and the baby on the examination table slept through all of it, one fist pressed to his cheek, the golden snitches on his blanket still moving in their lazy, enchanted circles. These readings, Fury finally said, are impossible. Yes, Carol agreed. She was leaning against the far wall with her arms crossed, watching him the way she watched things she expected to disagree with shortly. I know. There are 2 distinct energy signatures in this child. I know. One of them matches your binary energy profile at approximately 47%. 43. I had SHIELD scanner run it twice. Fury looked at her. How does a baby have your energy in his cells? I don't know. You picked him up and it just transferred. Yes. Or merged. The scanner isn't sure which, and frankly neither am I, and I've had binary energy for 8 years, so if I can't explain it. She stopped. Pushed off the wall. Walked to the table and looked down at the boy, who chose that moment to exhale contentedly and grip his blanket tighter. The second signature is the one I can't figure out. It's not Kree. It's not any cosmic energy type in the database. It runs at a frequency that the scanner keeps trying to classify as impossible and then giving up. And yet the kid is demonstrably here and demonstrably alive and demonstrably glowing with it, so clearly the scanner needs to update its definitions. She tilted her head. He's human, Fury. Full human genome. Earth origin, the bioscan says. That accent of impossible energy is coming from inside an otherwise completely ordinary human infant. Fury was quiet for another long moment. Where did he come from? He asked. I have no idea. He was in open space with no ship, no suit, no life support system, and no trajectory that traces back to any known launch point. He was just there. She paused. He has a scar. Fury looked up. On his forehead. Lightning bolt shaped. It's fresh, hours old at most, and whatever made it left an energy residue that the scanner classified as anomalous magical discharge, before telling me that magical discharge wasn't a real category and reclassifying it as thermal scarring, which it isn't. She met Fury's eye. Something happened to this kid tonight, Nick. Something bad, and something weird, and he came out the other side of it alive when he shouldn't have been. You think someone tried to kill him? I think something tried to kill him, Carol said quietly. And it didn't work. Fury looked at the baby for a while longer. The baby, as if sensing the weight of the moment, chose this point to open his eyes. They were very green. Remarkably, startlingly green, the color of sunlight through leaves, the color of growing things. They blinked once, twice, surveying the ceiling of the medical bay with the thoughtful expression of someone doing a very thorough assessment. Then they found Carol's face. The glow beneath the baby's skin pulsed, warm, immediate, pleased, and he reached upward. Carol, who was not a woman given to impulse decisions unless those decisions involved punching things, reached down before she'd thought about it and let him grab her finger again. The binary energy in her palm flickered in that same strange harmonic resonance she'd felt in space. The readout on the scanner spiked. Said Fury. Don't, Carol said. I didn't say anything. I can hear you thinking it. I'm thinking several things. He crossed his arms. I'm thinking this is a mess. I'm thinking we need to find out who this child is and where he came from and whether anyone is looking for him. I'm thinking that whatever is in him is extraordinary and I want the best people looking at it. And I'm thinking, he paused, watching the baby grip Carol's finger and stare up at her with those extraordinary eyes, that something in the universe thought you were the right person to find him. Carol looked away from the baby and at Fury. That's very poetic for you. I have my moments. He straightened. We'll run a full identification search. Cross-reference that energy signature with everything Sword and Shield have on file. Find out who he is. And until then? Fury's expression was, for the briefest moment, something softer than his default setting. Until then, Captain, I think you've already answered that question. Carol looked back at the baby. The baby was still holding her finger. He seemed entirely settled on the matter. Yeah, she said. I think I have. They named him Harry. The blanket had the name stitched into one corner in pale gold thread, Harry, in the round, careful letters of someone who had pressed the needle through the fabric with love and attention and probably while watching him sleep. That felt important to Carol in a way she couldn't fully articulate, so she kept the name and filed it away in the part of herself where she kept things that mattered. The months that followed were, by Carol's own admission, the most chaotic of her life, and she had once fought a war single-handedly in the orbit of a planet that was literally on fire at the time. S.H.I.E.L.D. ran every search Fury had promised and a dozen he hadn't. The energy signature in Harry's cells matched nothing in any database of either Earth or the broader universe that S.W.O.R.D. had catalogued. The scar on his forehead was made by something that left no chemical, biological, or technological trace, just absence, a clean and impossible void where whatever had caused it had burned up completely, leaving nothing but the mark and the faintest ghost of resonance that S.H.I.E.L.D.'s best analysts kept getting migraines trying to measure. Fury's contacts on Earth turned up precisely one lead, a community of what appeared to be practitioners of something the mainstream world had no framework for, a community that was apparently in the middle of some significant crisis in late October of that year, and which was extremely good at not being found by people who weren't supposed to find it. He filed that information away. Harry, in the meantime, was growing. He grew with a speed and surety that felt less like a timetable and more like intention, as if he had somewhere to be and was making reasonable time getting there. He was walking at 9 months. He was talking, real words, not baby approximations, by 11. By 18 months he could hold a conversation that, while limited in vocabulary, was notably more focused and logical than most people expected from someone who still tripped over his own feet going downstairs. The glowing had become a background feature. It flared when he was excited or frightened or, increasingly, when he was focused on something, some task that demanded his full attention. When he was 3 and Carol was teaching him the very basics of flight mechanics using a model ship in the common room of the Protector, he'd gotten so absorbed in trying to understand how the mass-to-thrust calculation worked that the glow had crept down his arms and pooled in his palms, and when he'd abruptly pointed at the model and said, "Fly," with the absolute authority of someone who expected the universe to agree, it had lifted off its own accord and performed a perfect barrel roll. Before Carol had caught it, heart-hammering. "Harry," she'd said. "Did you see?" he'd said. His eyes were wide and delighted. "Mom. Did you see?" She had seen. She'd also seen the way her own binary energy had flared in her chest in response, warm and resonant, as if his working had called to it. She'd put the model ship down very carefully. "I saw," she said. "Come here. Let me look at your hands." He held them out, completely unconcerned, the glow already fading back to its ambient level. There was no injury, no strain, no sign that doing something physically impossible had cost him anything at all. "Again," he said. "Not again today," Carol said. "Tomorrow." She looked at the small, wild-haired, wholly unreasonable person watching her with those green eyes and the particular brand of focused intensity that she had, somewhere in the last 2.5 years, come to recognize as specifically Harry. She was wearing it right now herself. She'd been told, on more than one occasion, by people who knew her well, that her resting face was the face of someone deciding whether a problem was worth punching. Harry had the same face. The universe had a sense of humor. "We'll talk about it," she said. "That means yes," Harry said. He was 3. "That means we'll talk about it." "Okay," Harry said, in a tone that communicated clearly that he had already decided it meant yes. Monica Rambeau met Harry when he was 4, on a visit that was supposed to be a quick briefing on Kree patrol patterns in the outer sectors and became, instead, a 3-hour adventure in which she ended up sitting cross-legged on the observation deck floor with an extremely interested 4-year-old who wanted to know exactly how her light manipulation worked. "Show me again," he said, for the 5th time. Monica glanced up at Carol, who was leaning against the door frame with an expression of resigned amusement. "This is what I deal with," the expression said. "Welcome to my life." Monica shifted the light through her hand, visible spectrum, easy and controlled, spilling gold white across her palm. "It's not that different from yours," she said, which was a lie told to a child because the truth was more complicated, but close enough to be useful. Harry leaned in. His nose was approximately 2 inches from her hand. "Mine is different though," he said seriously. "Mine is magic." "Who told you that?" "Carol." He looked back at his mother. "She says my glow is magic and her glow is science and they're the same thing." He tilted his head. Are they the same thing? Monica blinked. She thought about it honestly for a moment, which was not the response he was probably used to getting from adults. I don't know, she said. I think they might be. Harry looked intensely satisfied with this answer. That's what I thought, he said. Little star, Monica said, which was what she called him, had called him from the first time she'd seen the faint luminescence moving under his skin like deep water light. What do you want to do with yours? The magic. He thought about this with the total seriousness of 4 years old applied to a genuinely interesting question. Everything, he said eventually. I want to know how all of it works and then do all of it. Monica looked at Carol again. Carol's expression had shifted from resigned amusement to something quieter and more private, the look of someone watching a thing they love doing something that breaks their heart a little, in the good way. In the way that means look at what you've grown. Yeah, Monica said softly. I think you will. The years accumulated, as years do when you're not paying full attention to the fact that they're passing. Harry at 5, sitting in Carol's lap in the cockpit of the Protector while she walked him through basic navigation, his small hands on the secondary control panel, his eyes tracking the stars with the same focused attention he gave everything he actually cared about. He could already identify most of the visible constellations from Earth's sky. Carol had taught him those first, for reasons she hadn't fully explained to herself. The stories of Orion and Cassiopeia and the Plough told in the same practical tone she used for everything, as if ancient human myths were just more navigation data. He had asked about Earth twice that year. Both times Carol had answered honestly, I know a little, not a lot, we'll go someday. Both times he had accepted this with a nod and moved on to something else. He was, Carol had noted, very good at accepting provisional answers while clearly filing them away under to be revisited. Harry at 6, on a shore leave on a Skrull colony world where the sky was permanently amber, running ahead of Talos through a market that smelled of 12 different kinds of unfamiliar spice, talking to every vendor who'd talk back, accumulating 3 new words in 3 different languages in the space of an afternoon, eating something blue and unidentified off a skewer and declaring it excellent before anyone could stop him. Talos looked at Carol. Carol shrugged. He's never gotten sick from anything yet. The binary energy in the boy's cells, their best medical people theorized, had fused with the other energy, the impossible, unclassifiable, magical energy, to produce an immune system that could handle most of what the universe threw at it. This seemed to be true. Harry had a spectacular track record of eating and touching and enthusiastically engaging with things that should have made him very ill and simply not being ill. Harry at 7, hovering 6 feet off the ground in the cargo bay while Carol put him through his first real flying drills. Not in a ship. Flying. The way she flew, the way binary energy lifted and carried her through vacuum and atmosphere alike. The first time he'd gone up, the glow had spread from his core outward, golden white threaded with something older and stranger, something that moved like fire through water, and he'd looked down at Carol with an expression of such pure joy that she'd had to turn away for a moment to get her face back under control. Can you stop? She'd asked. He'd come back down, neat and controlled, like he'd been doing it for years. Which, in a sense, in whatever pre-memory understanding his body carried from those first hours in space, maybe he had. Easy, he said. Show off, Carol said. He grinned. It was her grin. She hadn't taught it to him, it had just developed, the way the things that are carried in you develop, and when she saw it on his face she felt something complicated and bright and completely worth whatever the universe had cost her to get here. Harry at 8, poring over an encrypted Kree military database that Fury had quietly made available, cross-referencing the partial information about his energy signature that Sword had compiled with everything the database had on unusual cosmic phenomena. He'd found 3 references that might be relevant and none that were conclusive, and he'd written his findings in a small notebook in handwriting that was appalling for his age and absolutely precise in its content. He'd brought it to Carol that evening after dinner. I think my magic is old, he said, handing her the notebook. Like, older than space old. The Kree records have got references to a primordial field that precedes star formation. They didn't know what it was. I think it might be the same thing. Carol read the notes. She wasn't a scientist in the traditional sense, but she'd spent enough time around extraordinary things to know the difference between coincidence and pattern. This is good, she said, handing it back. It's not complete, he said. Most things aren't. That's what research is for. He looked at her sideways, in the considering way he'd been looking at her lately, something assessing an adult in a face that was still mostly childhood. You know more about where I came from than you've told me, he said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a simple, careful observation. Carol set down her cup. I know there's a place called Earth where humans live and where you originated. I know there's a community there that practices something like what you can do. I know Fury has a file on it. I know we haven't gone yet, and I haven't pushed on it, and that was probably a mistake. Harry was quiet for a moment. Why haven't you pushed on it? She gave him the honest answer because she always gave him the honest answer. Because knowing might lead somewhere you have to go that I can't follow. He was quiet for longer this time. Outside the viewport, a belt of asteroids drifted past in slow and ancient rotation, lit from one side by the light of a distant star. He watched them for a while. You could follow, he said finally. You can go anywhere. Physically, yes. He seemed to turn this over. Then he said, when I'm ready to go, I'll tell you. And we'll go together. A beat. That's a deal, not a question. She looked at him. He was 8. He had apparently already figured out how to negotiate. Deal, she said. He was 9 the first time he went binary. It was an accident, in the way that most significant things in Harry's life were accidents, which was to say they were the inevitable result of what he was, expressed in a moment the circumstances happened to unlock. They were under attack. A rogue Kree extremist ship, one of the splinter cells that still operated outside the Alliance framework, still furious about the peace, still looking for something to take their frustration out on, had jumped them in the PAMA system while Carol was doing an EVA check on the outer hull and Harry was in the common room allegedly doing navigation homework and actually teaching himself to juggle using small objects and a careful application of wandless levitation. The first shot rocked the ship hard enough to throw him off the couch. He was on his feet before the second one hit, moving the way Carol had drilled into him, cover first, assess second, act third. He made it to the secondary bridge, pulled up the sensor display, and understood the situation in about 4 seconds. The Protector's shields were at 60% and falling. Carol was on the hull, exposed, and her comm wasn't reaching her through the EM interference the attacking ship was broadcasting. The 3 crew members on duty were managing evasive maneuvers but they were outgunned, and their weapons response was coordinated but not fast enough. Harry looked at the sensor display. He looked at the attacking ship's shield frequency, which was displayed in standard Kree notation. He looked at his own hands, where the glow was doing something it had never quite done before, gathering, pooling, building, responding to the urgency in him with an appetite that felt enormous and entirely unhesitant. He thought about what he knew about binary energy. About photon manipulation. About the way Carol talked about it. It's not about pushing, it's about knowing that the energy already wants to move, and moving with it. He thought about the magic underneath the binary energy, the ancient earth-rooted thing that had been in him since before he could remember, that manifested as telekinesis and what the crew had started calling charms and the ability to make small impossible things happen with focused intention. He thought, what if they're the same thing moving in the same direction at once? He stopped thinking and let them. The glow went white. Not his usual ambient shimmer. Not even the warm golden white of when he flew. White. Total and absolute, the same light Carol produced when she went full binary, but this was threaded through with something else, something that moved like ancient fire, like the light at the bottom of very deep water, like the resonance he'd felt all his life as a kind of background music suddenly turned up to full volume. It didn't hurt. It felt like exhaling after holding his breath for years. He looked at the sensor display, and with that full white light gathered in his hands, he reached, not physically, with his hands, but through the ship's hull, through 3,000 miles of space, through the attacking vessel's shield frequency with a precision he couldn't have explained but felt as perfectly natural, and he pushed. The attacking ship's shields inverted. The feedback cascade took out their weapons array. They listed hard to port, thrusters firing erratically as their systems tried to compensate. The protector's bridge went very quiet. Harry's light faded slowly back to its baseline. He looked at his hands. He felt fine. He felt, if he was being exact about it, really good, the way he felt after flying, after a hard training session, after doing something at the full edge of his capability. Alive and clear and very slightly breathless. Carol came through the inner airlock 30 seconds later, helmet off, expression doing the rapid sequence he recognized as I felt that from outside. What happened? Is everyone alive? Where is Harry? And then locating him on the secondary bridge and cycling through two more expressions too fast to name before settling on something that was very calm in the deliberate way she used when she was not calm at all. She looked at the sensor display. She looked at the neutralized attacking ship drifting in the distance. She looked at him. Navigation homework, she said. I finished, Harry said. Aha. She crossed the bridge and crouched down so she was at his eye level, which she hadn't done in at least 2 years because he was almost as tall as her now and it was getting ridiculous. She looked at him very carefully, the way she checked him over after anything that might have hurt him, methodical, thorough, not hiding that she was worried. You went binary, she said. I think it was more like, binary plus. Plus what? He considered. Plus everything else. She was quiet for a long moment. The sensor display beeped softly as the attacking ship's crew began broadcasting a distress signal. They were alive in there, disabled, not dead. Harry had been precise about that. He was always precise about that. Does it feel different? Carol asked. It feels like it's always been there, he said honestly. I just didn't know how to open both doors at the same time. Carol nodded, slowly. She looked at the display again. She looked at her hands, her own binary gold, and then back at him. He could see her deciding something. He could always see her deciding things. She had a terrible poker face for the people who knew what to look for. When you're ready, she said, we're going to Earth. He looked at her. Did something change? Yeah. Her voice was steady, matter of fact, the voice she used for true things she didn't want to dress up. You did. The asteroid belt outside moved in its slow rotation. The stars were everywhere and had no opinion about any of this, which was one of the things Harry had always found reliable about them. Okay, he said. Not yet, but, okay. She stood. She put one hand briefly on the top of his head, which she almost never did anymore, and said nothing else, because she didn't have to. He went back to his navigation homework. She went to call Fury. 2 years later, the owl arrived. But that's a different chapter. Chapter 2, the letter finds him. The owl should not have been able to find him. That was the first thing Harry noticed about it, not the fact that it was an owl, though an owl in the vacuum-adjacent outer corridor of a deep space vessel was admittedly a notable event. Not the fact that it was carrying a letter sealed with red wax, or that the letter was addressed in emerald green ink, or that the envelope was slightly smoking at the corners from whatever atmospheric shimmer surrounded the bird like a personal weather system. All of those things were remarkable. But the first thing, the thing that made Harry set down his breakfast and lean forward with the particular quality of attention he reserved for genuinely interesting problems, was the simple navigational impossibility of the situation. The Protector was in a rolling orbit around Jupiter. Not near Jupiter in the casual, colloquial sense. Around Jupiter, inside the radiation belt, running dark, no transponder signal, no public registry, masked behind 3 layers of sword signal dampening because Fury had asked Carol to park here for a week while he dealt with what he'd called a terrestrial situation requiring deniability and preferably your absence from any satellite imaging. Harry had been mapping the Jovian magnetic field variations for a school project he was technically supposed to have submitted to his SWORD-approved tutor 3 days ago and had instead expanded into a full cartographic analysis because once he'd started he couldn't find a reason to stop. Point being, nobody was supposed to know they were here. Nobody could know they were here, by any rational application of logic. The owl landed on the table next to his cup of tea, looked at him with large amber eyes, and extended its leg. Harry looked at the envelope. The envelope looked back at him. Or at least the address on the front seemed to, the ink having been written with a specificity that defied everything he understood about the mechanics of mail delivery. Mr. H. Danvers Potter the Protector, Deck 7 near Jupiter, Orbit 73. He picked it up. The wax seal was stamped with a crest, a lion, an eagle, a badger, a snake, arranged around the letter H, and the moment his fingers touched it the glow under his skin pulsed, low and deep and recognizing, the way it did sometimes when something resonated with the older energy in him, the earth-rooted thing beneath the binary light. "Ha," Harry said. He turned the envelope over. Turned it back. Looked at the owl, which had the bearing of something that had completed a very long journey and expected to be acknowledged for the achievement. "All right," he said, to the owl and to himself equally. "All right, let's see." He broke the seal. Carol was on the calm with fury when she heard Harry's footsteps coming down the corridor at a pace that was not running. Harry was disciplined enough not to run on the ship, a rule she'd installed at age 4 and maintained through a combination of principle and the memory of him taking a corner at full sprint and going face first into a support strut, but was very clearly the maximum speed achievable while technically still walking. "I'll call you back," she told Fury. "We're not done." "Yes we are. Bye." She cut the comm and turned to face the door. Harry came through it with the particular combination of composure and barely contained urgency that meant he had found something either wonderful or deeply concerning, and experience told her it was usually both. He was holding a letter. And standing behind him, in the corridor, was an owl. Carol stared at the owl. The owl stared back. "There's a letter," Harry said. "I can see that. It's addressed to me. With our current coordinates." He held it out. "We're dark, Mom. Nobody has these coordinates." Carol took the letter. She read the address. She read it again. She looked up. "This says Deck 7. I know. We're on Deck 7. I know. How did, I don't know." He was watching her with those green eyes doing their full focus thing. "Open it. It's addressed to you. You can open it." "That's not, Harry, that's not how." She stopped. Looked at the letter. Looked at him. "You already read it." "I read the outside of the letter, yes, and then I was excited and wanted a second opinion before I opened it, which I realize now might have been, you were nervous," Carol said. He opened his mouth. Closed it. "I was cautious." "You were nervous." She held the letter back out to him. "Open your letter." He took it. He looked at it for one more moment, and she saw it, the thing she'd learned to see in him over 11 years, the small flicker of something vulnerable that he tucked behind his usual forward momentum like a card up a sleeve. He was nervous. Whatever this was, whatever he sensed in the envelope or the seal or the magic that had apparently directed a single owl across the solar system to their hidden orbit, it meant something he hadn't fully sorted through yet. He opened the letter. She watched him read. His expression moved through several things very quickly, attention, then recognition, then something slower and more complicated that took up residence in the set of his jaw and the way his eyes tracked back to the top of the page. He handed it to her without a word. She read. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry Headmaster, Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore. Dear Mr. Danvers Potter, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Please find enclosed a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by no later than July 31st. Yours sincerely, Minerva McGonagall Deputy Headmistress Carol read the list of supplies. She read the list twice. She set the letter down on the nearest console with the careful, controlled movement of someone choosing not to demonstrate what her hands wanted to do, which was considerably less controlled. "They want you to bring a cauldron," she said. "Pewter, size 2, Harry said. "To a school." "A school for magic." "Yes." He was watching her. "Mom. I'm fine. You've got your punching thing's face." "I don't have a," she stopped. She picked the letter up again. She looked at the crest on the header and felt the faintest hum against her fingertips, not her own energy, but a response to it, something in the ink itself that recognized what she carried, or what Harry carried, or both. "Where is this school?" "Scotland, from what I can gather. The parchment reacts when I hold it." He held his hand over the letter and the glow in his palm sharpened briefly, the older energy rising, and on the parchment, for just a moment, a tiny map bloomed in the fibers, showing a castle on a lakeshore in a range of green hills, then faded. "It knows me," he said. "Or it knows what's in me." Carol looked at the map ghost on the parchment. "Get Fury on the comm," she said. Fury looked at the letter for approximately 40 seconds before he did something Carol had only seen him do 3 times in 12 years of knowing him. He sat down without being asked. The briefing room of the Protector was small and efficient, the kind of room that didn't have spare space for drama, which made his sitting down into the nearest chair feel more significant than it would have anywhere else. "I know about Hogwarts," he said. The room went very quiet. Carol had suspected. She'd known Fury had a file on the British wizarding community that he'd compiled early in Harry's life and never fully shared, and she'd chosen at the time to wait until Harry was ready, as she'd told herself. What she had not fully considered was that Fury might have been doing the same thing with considerably more information than she had. She considered this now. She considered it quite carefully for several seconds. "Explain," she said, in a voice that was remarkably even given the circumstances. Fury met her eyes. He didn't apologize, that wasn't his language, but he had the bearing of a man who understood exactly how this conversation was going to go and had decided to go through it honestly. "The wizarding world is real. It's old. It's hidden, deliberately, behind a system of concealment they call the Statute of Secrecy. They have schools, governments, a legal system, an economy. They've coexisted with the non-magical world for centuries." He paused. "I've known about them for about 10 years. I've been mapping the infrastructure very carefully." "And?" Carol said. "And 11 years ago, the night Harry arrived, there was a significant event in their world. A kind of war that had been running for over a decade ended, specifically because the dark wizard who'd been fighting it died." He looked at Harry. "They say he died because he tried to kill a child and the curse rebounded." Harry was very still. He was good at stillness when it mattered, in the way she'd taught him. Stillness isn't the absence of readiness, it's readiness with nowhere to go yet. "Me," Harry said. "You." Fury's voice was, for him, almost gentle. "Your parents were James and Lily Potter. Your father was a wizard. Your mother was a witch of considerable power. They died protecting you from a man who believed you were a specific threat to his power." A pause. "They weren't wrong to protect you. But they also weren't entirely wrong about the threat. You are the reason that war ended." Harry was quiet for a long moment. The ship hummed around them. "Do I have family?" he asked. "In that world?" "Your mother's sister. She lives in Surrey. She isn't magical, and by all available intelligence she was not, a warm presence in your parents' lives." Fury's expression made its feelings on the ant clear without needing further elaboration. "Your father's family is mostly gone. There's a godfather, Sirius Black. He was wrongly imprisoned for 12 years. He was released 2 years ago and has been attempting, by all accounts, to locate you. He doesn't know where to look." "And the school?" Carol asked. Sends a letter to every magical child in Britain on their 11th birthday, apparently delivered by whatever means the magic requires. Fury looked almost impressed against his will. It found him in a masked, dark orbit around Jupiter. The headmaster is a man named Albus Dumbledore. He is significant. Probably the most powerful wizard alive. Probably the most politically influential figure in their world. Certainly the most informed. He paused. I believe he knew what happened to Harry 11 years ago and chose to wait for the school's natural systems to make contact. That's a generous interpretation, Carol said. It's a tactical one. Fury looked at the letter. He wanted to see what would happen when Harry was of age to be found. Harry had been listening to all of this with the notebook expression, the face he wore when he was encoding information, sorting it, filing it in the right places. Carol had watched him do it for 11 years. She watched him do it now, with information that was about his own life, his own history, the parents he had never known, and she kept her own feelings where she'd always kept them when he needed the space, tucked away, available if he needed them, not taking up room that wasn't hers. I want to go, Harry said. To Hogwarts, Carol said. To England first. Diagon Alley is on the supply list. He held up the second parchment, the equipment list. And I want to see the wizarding world. And then yes, Hogwarts. He looked at her. The letter says September 1st. We have time. We have time, Carol agreed. He nodded, once. Okay. Good. He stood. I'm going to go, I need to think for a bit. He looked at Fury. Thank you for telling me the truth. Even the delayed version. Fury accepted this with a slight incline of his head that was the closest thing to contrition he was likely to offer. Harry left the room. The owl, which had been perched on a monitor for this entire conversation, chose this moment to exit through the ventilation grate in a way that should have been impossible for a bird its size. Carol and Fury sat with the silence for a moment. You should have told me sooner, Carol said. I know. He had a right, I know, Carol. Fury looked at the letter on the table. I was protecting an asset. He's not an asset. No. A pause. I know that too. I've known it for a while. He looked at her sidelong. You going to Earth? Obviously. The wizarding world won't know what to do with him. The wizarding world can adapt. Carol picked up the letter. Monica's coming with us. I figured. And you're coming. Nick. She leveled a look at him that had, over the years, evolved from I will punch you into the sun to something more like don't test me before coffee. You have 11 years of files on these people. You're coming. Fury looked at his hands. Looked at the door Harry had walked through. Made a decision that looked, on the surface, exactly like agreeing with someone and was, beneath the surface, something a great deal more like choosing a side. Fine, he said. I'll drive. London in August was hot and grey and improbably busy in the way of cities that have been continuously inhabited for 2,000 years and have accumulated a sense of crowded self-importance from the experience. Harry pressed his face to the window of their rental car in a way that was only slightly undignified and watched the streets move past. He'd been to Earth before. Twice, briefly, for sword briefings that Fury had needed Carol physically present for, and he'd been 11 and 13 and hadn't been permitted to wander. This felt different. This felt like arriving somewhere he was supposed to have been. He couldn't have explained why, it was just a hum in the older energy layer of himself, something that recognized the latitude and the light and the particular green of the trees in Hyde Park as they drove past and said, in a language below language, here. The leaky cauldron, Fury said, from the front seat, reading from a dossier that was thicker than Harry's arm, is on Charing Cross Road. It functions as an entry point to the wizarding commercial district called Diagon Alley. Non-magical people can't see it. Can we? Monica asked. She was in the back seat next to Harry, watching London with the quiet, absorptive attention of someone cataloging everything. Harry can. Whether the rest of us, Fury paused. Unknown. We'll figure it out, Carol said, from the passenger seat, in a tone that said the universe was going to cooperate or have a conversation about why not. Charing Cross Road was narrow and bookshop dense and smelled of paper and exhaust and the specific greyness of a London summer morning. Harry stood on the pavement outside a grubby-looking pub that he could see perfectly clearly and the others appeared to be having varying degrees of success with. Fury found it after 30 seconds of focused attention, Monica after a moment. Carol appeared to have always been able to see it and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. It's very small, Harry said. Most important things are, Fury said. Harry pushed the door open and went inside. The leaky cauldron was dark and low-ceilinged and smelled of something ancient and slightly combustible, the accumulated atmosphere of decades of magical clientele. It was about half full at this hour. Heads turned when they walked in, a few curious glances at Monica and Fury and Carol, the specific way strangers clocked outsiders in a place used to its regulars, and then turned more sharply when they landed on Harry. It was immediate, and it was odd. Not aggressive. More like, recognition. The kind that moved across a room in a wave, person to person, like a current. An elderly witch near the bar made a sound. A young wizard with a self-inking quill dropped it. The barman, Tom, ancient and bald and apparently made of weathered timber, looked at Harry for a long moment before his face did something complicated and quiet. Mr. Potter, Tom said, softly. Been a long time since we've had a Potter in here. The room did its collective breath-holding thing again. Harry looked at the barman. He thought about Fury's briefing. He thought about James and Lily Potter, who had been here, who had walked through this door, who had sat at these tables. He thought about the hum in the older energy layer that had started saying here the moment they crossed the city limits. Harry, he said. Just Harry. He paused. I need to get to Diagon Alley. We've got a supply list. Tom's face settled into something warm. Of course. Right through the back. The wall opened to let them through, Tom tapping the bricks in a sequence that Carol watched with the bright, cataloging attention she gave things she found structurally interesting. Harry stepped through into Diagon Alley and stopped. He'd read about it. He'd found 2 partial descriptions in the sword files, secondhand, observed through magical concealment by agents who'd managed brief proximity, written in the flat language of intelligence reports that categorically failed to communicate what it actually felt like to stand in the middle of it. The cobbled street curved ahead of him, packed with people in robes, lined with shops selling things his brain required a moment to process, cauldrons and telescopes, books whose spines moved, owls in cages, a window full of broomsticks that his body immediately recognized as flying objects and therefore interesting. The magic was everywhere. Not ambient. Not background. It was in the air like pressure, like the way the space around a star feels differently than empty space, the same medium, different properties. The older energy layer in him blazed to life on contact with it, warm and delighted and deeply familiar, and Harry stood very still for a moment just letting it happen, letting himself feel it soak in like sunlight. You all right? Carol asked, beside him. Yeah. He turned to her. She was watching him with that careful attention she deployed when she was worried but knew not to show it. I can feel the magic in the air here. It's the same as mine. Or mine is the same as this. He looked at his hands. The glow was closer to the surface than usual. It's like being home. Good, she said, and meant it completely, without any of the complicated feelings he suspected she also had about that statement. She was good at that. She had always been good at that, putting his needs ahead of her preferences and not making him feel the cost of it. He bumped his shoulder against hers. She bumped back. They walked into Diagon Alley. Gringotts was built at the far end of the alley in the way of things that want you to understand, before you enter, that you are smaller than they are and would do well to remember it. The marble columns were white and cold, and the goblins at the outer doors looked at them with the specific assessment of beings who were deciding whether you were worth their time and leaning toward no. Harry met the assessment with his usual composure and walked in. The goblin at the high desk looked down at him. Purpose of visit? I'm Harry Potter. I believe I have a vault here. He put the Hogwarts letter on the desk. And I've been told my mother may have left something. A pause. The goblin looked at the letter, then at Harry, then at the scar on his forehead which was barely visible beneath his hair. The appraisal shifted slightly, not warmer, goblins didn't really do warm, but more attentive. A kind of professional recalibration. Ragnarok, the goblin said, to nothing visible. Another goblin appeared. Potter Vault. And the sealed bequest. They went down in the cart at a speed that Harry found exhilarating and Fury found undignified and Monica found analytically interesting. The vaults went deep, deeper than felt architectural, as if the tunnels extended into some other kind of space where distance worked differently. Harry kept his hand on the cart's edge and watched the numbers on the vault doors climb down. The Potter Vault was substantial. Not ostentatiously so, not the great cascading piles of certain old family vaults, but comfortable, well-stocked, the vault of people who had lived well and thought ahead. Harry stood in the doorway and looked at it and felt the older energy hum of his, "This is yours, this has been waiting," and breathed out slowly. "Take what you need," Ragnarok said, which was Goblin for "Please don't be overwhelmed in my vault, it makes paperwork." Carol stood at his shoulder. She didn't say anything. He filled a pouch at the exchange rate Fury had pre-calculated, and turned to follow Ragnarok out, and then the goblin said, almost as an aside, "The sealed bequest." They went deeper. This vault was smaller. It held almost nothing, a stone bowl on a pedestal, wide and shallow, filled with something that wasn't liquid and wasn't light but existed somewhere between the two. A pensieve, Harry realized from the sword files. A memory vessel. There was a sealed envelope on the pedestal beside it. For Harry, when he's ready. Lily Potter's handwriting, he'd never seen it before and knew it immediately, recognized it the way you recognize a voice you've only heard in your own head. "Give us a minute," Carol said to Ragnarok, and Ragnarok withdrew. Harry stood in front of the pensieve for a moment that was longer than it looked from outside. "You don't have to do this now," Carol said. "I know." He picked up the envelope. Opened it. The note inside was short, half a page, no more, and he read it standing up, which seemed right. "Harry, if you're reading this, something has gone wrong that I couldn't prevent. I'm sorry for what that means. I want you to know that your father and I chose everything about our life knowing what it might cost, and we'd choose it again. The pensieve has one memory. It's the real one, not the story people will tell you, but what actually happened. Watch it when you're ready. Not before. You are made of love. Not the easy kind. The kind that doesn't stop. Come home when you can." Mum Harry stood with the letter for a while. The vault was very quiet. The thing in the pensieve moved in slow currents, patient as anything that has been waiting 11 years can be. He looked up at Carol. Her face was doing its careful neutral thing, the face that meant she had feelings she was managing at significant personal cost. Her eyes were bright. "I'm not watching it now," he said. She said, "When I'm ready." "Okay. I'll know when I'm ready." "I know you will." He looked at her for a moment. "She sounds like you," he said. "In the letter." "A bit." Carol looked away, which was the only version of being undone she usually allowed herself. "Put the letter somewhere safe," she said, voice entirely steady. He folded it with care and put it in his jacket pocket, next to his chest. He looked at the pensieve one more time, at the memory suspended in it, his mother's last gift to him, patient and permanent, and then walked out of the vault. Ollivander's was at the far end of a crooked side lane off the main alley, the kind of shop that had been in exactly one place for so long that the street had arranged itself around it rather than the other way around. The sign was faded. The single wand in the window was ancient-looking. The door opened with a sound that was less a bell and more a held breath. The interior was floor-to-ceiling boxes. Thousands of them, stacked in configurations that followed rules Harry couldn't identify but could feel, an ordering principle that ran on some axis beyond the geometric. Ollivander himself appeared from between the stacks without footsteps, which Harry noted approvingly. The old man moved like someone who had learned, over several centuries of practice, that the most interesting things happened to people who paid close attention. He looked at Harry for a long time. His pale eyes went to the scar, then to Harry's hands, then to some middle distance that appeared to be the place where Ollivander did most of his actual looking. "Remarkable," he said softly. "I have been expecting a Potter." "I did not expect," he stopped. His head tilted slightly. "You are carrying something that has never walked into my shop before." "I've been told," Harry said. "Two sources. Layered. Integrated at the cellular level." Ollivander moved closer, not invasively, but with the focused intent of a scientist who has spent his entire career on one question and is suddenly standing in front of an answer. "The second, the deep one, it's older than my oldest wand." He seemed genuinely awed, which was not a quality Harry had expected to find in the wand maker. "May I?" He held out his hand. Harry held out his. Ollivander's fingers hovered an inch above Harry's palm and the glow pulsed once, warm and steady. The old man closed his eyes briefly. "Yes," he said. "Yes, I see." He turned back to his stacks. "The conventional wood and core combinations will not suffice. Holly and phoenix feather would be the traditional fit. It was made for you, technically, years ago, the brother one-to-one that should concern you greatly, but it won't work for what you are. Holly is too narrow. Phoenix is too single-noted." He disappeared between the stacks. For the next 40 minutes, Harry worked through 17 wands in rapid succession, each of which responded to him and each of which was insufficient, not broken, not wrong, just limited, the way a bucket is limited when you're trying to hold an ocean. They sparked, they hummed, they produced moderate flashes of impressive light, and Harry set each one back in its box politely and waited. Carol had been in the doorway for the first 10 minutes. Now she was inside, arms crossed, watching with the look she wore when she was making herself stay out of something that her instincts kept pushing her toward. "There's one more," Ollivander said, from deep in the stacks. He came back carrying a box that was different from the others, older, the wood darker, the brass hinges green with age. "I've had this for 30 years. I didn't know who it was for. I made it because the materials arrived and the combination insisted." He opened the box. The wand was 13 inches, a dark wood that was almost black, not ebony, something denser and older, driftwood, Harry thought, from somewhere with deep tidal magic. The core was phoenix feather, but doubled, 2 feathers wound together, and between them something Ollivander described as a fragment of meteorite iron of extraterrestrial origin, which arrived in my materials stock from a source I never identified. Harry picked it up. The result was not a spark or a flash or a shower of stars. It was a sound, a resonance, low and full, that Harry felt in his chest before he heard it with his ears. The binary energy in him and the older magic in him responded to the wand in the same moment, for what might have been the first time ever doing so at once without being deliberately forced into alignment, and the wand blazed, not with light but with warmth, gold and ancient white together, a heat that was entirely comfortable, like sunlight on a cold day. Every wand box on every shelf rattled once, then settled. Ollivander stared at his shop. He stared at Harry. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. 13 inches, he said finally. Driftwood from the Mariana Deep and meteorite iron from a crater in Kazakhstan. 2 phoenix feathers, both tail feathers from the same bird, fox, who donated a 3rd feather for a wand that could not harm you. He seemed to be speaking more to himself than to Harry. "I think the universe has been planning this particular wand for a very long time." Harry looked at it in his hand, felt the rightness of it, the way the 2 halves of himself recognized the dual core, the earthly deep water wood and the fallen star iron, and said yes, this is the tool, this is the shape of it, and looked up. How much? He asked. Ollivander's pale eyes were warm with something that looked like the pleasure of a craftsman who has seen, after decades, the exact use their best work was made for. 7 galleons, he said. As ever. Carol paid. She paid with the air of someone doing a completely ordinary transaction while internally processing approximately 47 things, which was about her average. They walked back out into Diagon Alley in the late afternoon light. The alley was thinning out, witches and wizards heading home, the shops beginning to dim. Harry walked with his new wand in his jacket pocket and felt it there like a tuning fork sitting at exactly the right frequency, present, resonant, ready. Monica caught up to him from the bookshop 3 doors down where she'd been browsing with the focused intensity of a woman who reads everything. I bought you the full book list, she said, and also a few extras. Which extras? She handed him a small stack. He read the titles, Magical Theory by Adalbert Waffling. A History of Magic by Bathilda Bagshot. The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1 through 3. And underneath those, in her own handwriting on a folded piece of paper, You're going to be extraordinary, little star. Even more than you already are. He folded the note and put it with his mother's letter. Thank you, he said. Monica smiled, the warm specific smile she'd had for him since he was 4 years old and had wanted to know how her light worked. Don't thank me. Go conquer something. They found Fury at a tea shop on the corner, apparently having a perfectly civil conversation with a witch in purple robes who was explaining the finer points of the ministry's transportation network. He looked up when they arrived, scanned them all for injury, and said, We're going to need to talk about this Dumbledore situation before September 1st. We'll talk on the ship, Carol said. The owl came back, by the way. It's living in the cargo hold. I gave it some food. You fed the wizard owl, Carol said. It looked hungry. Harry laughed, a real one, sudden and full, the kind that made Monica grin and Carol's expression go soft before she got it under control. They walked back through the leaky cauldron and out onto Charing Cross Road, into the ordinary warm grey of a London evening, and Harry kept his hand in his pocket with his fingers around the wand that had been waiting 30 years for him and felt the hum of the older energy quiet and steady and deep, saying, as it had said since he'd crossed the city limits, Here. 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 He was beginning to believe it. Chapter 3, 11 Years of Letters. The Protector felt different on the way back. Harry noticed it 2 hours after they'd left Earth's atmosphere, somewhere between the moon and the nothing beyond it. It wasn't the ship that had changed, same corridors, same hum of the drives, same coffee smell from the galley that never fully cleared no matter how many times the ventilation cycled. It was the specific quality of the silence in his cabin, the way the dark outside the porthole looked different when you knew, now, what was below it. Earth was a blue-green suggestion against the black. He could see it from his bunk if he pressed his cheek to the cold glass. He lay on his back instead and looked at the ceiling. The wand was on the shelf above his bunk. He'd taken it out twice since they'd left Ollivander's and held it without casting anything, just feeling the resonance of it, the dual-core hum that matched the dual nature of what he was. The meteorite iron. The deep-water wood. He kept coming back to Ollivander's voice, I didn't know who it was for. I made it because the materials arrived and the combination insisted. The universe had been planning this wand for 30 years. He didn't know how he felt about that. He didn't know how he felt about most of what today had deposited in him, his mother's handwriting, the pensive waiting in a vault deep underground with its one patient memory, the way the magic in Diagon Alley had felt like stepping into a room he'd lived in before but couldn't quite remember. He was good at processing. He could usually find the shape of something and file it correctly. Today had given him too many shapes at once. He reached for the notebook on his shelf, the current one, the third this year, already 3/4 full. He opened it to a blank page and wrote at the top, James and Lily Potter. Then he wrote, Sirius Black, Godfather, wrongfully imprisoned, released 2 years ago, looking for me. Then he wrote, Hogwarts, September 1st. Then he looked at what he'd written and drew a line connecting all three items and wrote in the margin beside the line, mine. Not a question. A statement. He wasn't sure when he'd fallen asleep, but Carol woke him at 6 the next morning by knocking twice and coming in without waiting, which was her standard approach, placing a cup of tea on his shelf with the efficiency of someone who had performed this action enough times that it had become load-bearing in the architecture of his mornings. "Fury wants a briefing at 8, she said. "What are we briefing?" "Dumbledore." She sat on the edge of his bunk, which she did less often now that he was almost as tall as her and the bunk was genuinely not sized for two people. "And what happened September 1st? "I'm going," Harry said. "I know you're going. The briefing is about how." She looked at him. The early morning light in his cabin was the particular grey-blue of filtered starlight, and it made the angles of her face sharper, more honest somehow. She looked tired. He wondered if she'd slept. "How are you doing?" "I'm good. Harry. I'm processing." He sat up. "It's a lot. I knew it would be a lot, and it's still a lot." He picked up the tea. "The letter from Mum, you don't have to." "No, I want to." He turned the cup in his hands. "She sounds like someone I would have liked." "That's the part that's," he stopped. "Not hard, exactly. Just very present. The fact that she's not here is very present today." Carol was quiet for a moment in the way she was quiet when she was choosing between several true things to say. She said, "She sounds like someone who would have been very proud of who you are." "You don't know that." "I know what she wrote in the letter. I know what I know about you." A pause. "I know that anyone who loved you enough to do what she did would have loved every version of what came after." Her voice was steady and exact, the way she was with things she meant completely. Including the version that grew up between galaxies and came back to Diagon Alley and knew which wand was his on the first real try. Harry looked at her. This was the part of Carol that the universe mostly didn't get to see, not the binary blazing captain, not the tactician, not the woman who had held a war in one hand while brokering peace with the other. This part. The one that had learned to be a mother the way she'd learned everything, by deciding to, fully, without reservation, and then simply being it. "You know," he said, "for someone who claims to be bad at feelings, I'm excellent at feelings," Carol said, with dignity. "I just have a limited tolerance for discussing them at length." He smiled into his tea. "See you at 8. Fury's briefing on Albus Dumbledore took 40 minutes and could have been delivered in 10 if Fury had been willing to leave out the contextual analysis, which he wasn't. The picture that emerged was of a man who was genuinely extraordinary, magically, politically, intellectually, and who had spent approximately 70 years using that extraordinariness in the service of what he believed was right, with a growing and occasionally catastrophic confidence in his own judgment about what right meant. He had been right about enough things often enough that being wrong had apparently stopped occurring to him as a live possibility. He knew about the rift, Fury said, at the 20-minute mark, placing a satellite image of Godric's Hollow on the table beside a scan of the energy readings from that night that S.H.I.E.L.D. had retroactively pulled from their archive. He had monitoring charms on the Potter property. He got readings of the magical discharge, the rift opening. He had to have known that the child wasn't in the rubble. "And he let people believe Harry was dead," Carol said. Her voice was its most even, which was its most dangerous. "He let the search go cold," Fury said. "Which isn't the same thing." He paused. He may have told himself the rift took Harry somewhere fatal. He may have decided it didn't matter. He may have decided that whatever the rift produced was something best evaluated when it arrived in his schoolroom on its own terms. A pause. "I don't know which. What I know is that Hogwarts has a deputy headmistress named McGonagall who seems to run most of the operational day-to-day without Dumbledore's level of strategic ambiguity, and that the school itself, the building, the grounds, the wards, is one of the safest structures in the known world." He looked at Harry. "Magically, at least." "It's still a school," Monica said. She was leaning back in her chair with her arms crossed. "What's the student body like?" Roughly 300 students, ages 11 to 17, divided into 4 houses. Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw, Slytherin. House rivalry is significant, occasionally producing genuine enmity. Fury's expression was flat. One of the houses, Slytherin, has a documented history of producing a disproportionate number of dark wizards, including Voldemort himself and most of his inner circle. This is used to argue for or against prejudice depending on who you ask. The school is functional, academically rigorous, and has a notable history of placing students in significant danger through a combination of good intentions and poor logistics. Fantastic, Carol said. There's also something in the third-floor corridor this year that several staff members are apparently acting very concerned about, Fury added. I don't have the specifics. Of course there is, Harry said. He didn't sound concerned. He sounded interested. Carol pointed at him. You are going to school to learn, not to investigate whatever is in the third-floor corridor. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Harry. I'm just saying, the third-floor corridor is not your problem. He met her eyes and said absolutely nothing, which was its own kind of answer, and Carol made the face she made when she recognized she was arguing with herself 20 years ago and knew exactly how it was going to end. I want check-in protocols, she said to Fury. Weekly. And if anything in that castle moves against him, I'll be fine, Harry said. I know you will. I still want check-in protocols. Every Sunday, Harry offered. Hedwig can carry letters. Monica showed me how to key her to a spatial anchor so she can find the ship regardless of our orbit. Fury looked at him. You figured out Kree's spatial anchor theory and applied it to an owl. She's very smart, Harry said. She adapted well. Fury looked at Carol. Carol looked at the ceiling. Every Sunday, she agreed. And you tell me the moment anything feels wrong. Define wrong. Harry. Define it specifically, because my threshold is different from most people's, I know, Carol said. Tell me when something is wrong enough that you think I should know about it. He considered this as a calibration. That's fair, he said. I know it is, I'm calibrated well. She stood. Okay. We have 3 weeks before September 1st. I want to do something. Something being. Something before you leave. She was looking at the viewport, at the star field beyond it, the familiar vast dark. I want to take the ship through the Cassiopeia run. The full route. Like we did when you were 7. Harry was quiet for a moment. The Cassiopeia run was 12 days through the most visually spectacular stretch of the outer sector, through the edge of a gold and copper nebula, past the twin binary stars they'd named themselves, out to the reef of asteroids that caught the light in a way that looked, from the right angle, like a wall of every color that existed. He'd been 7 and Carol had let him take the helm for 3 uninterrupted hours through the nebula and he'd flown with both hands on the controls and the glow blazing and the absolute certainty of belonging. Yeah, he said. Let's do the Cassiopeia run. Monica was already pulling up the navigation chart. Fury was already complaining that they were deviating from the scheduled return to the command post. Nobody listened to Fury, who seemed to expect this and was already refilling his coffee. The Cassiopeia run took 11 days. They flew it the way they always flew it, Carol on the main helm for the technical sections, Harry on secondary, taking the open stretches himself. On the 3rd day, passing through the outer edge of the nebula where the light went amber gold and the gas clouds were thick enough to feel like weather, Harry went binary for 20 minutes just because he could. Not for a fight. Not because anything required it. Just because the nebula was there and his whole self wanted to meet it at full capacity. He flew out ahead of the ship and the protector's external cameras tracked him. He could see his own wake behind him on the monitor when he came back, a trail of light in the gas clouds that took an hour to disperse. On the 7th day, in the quiet of the asteroid reef, he watched the pensive memory. He'd thought about it for 3 days before deciding he was ready, and had been right about the timing, not in the sense that it didn't cost him, but in the sense that he had enough of himself beneath him to hold the weight of it. He sat alone in his cabin with the small travel pensive they had made at a magical craftsman's workshop Fury had located in Edinburgh, and he tipped in the memory, and he went under. It was the nursery. His parents' voices. His father's laugh, short and real and luminous with love, and then a door opening and Lily's voice doing something that wasn't quite speaking and wasn't quite singing as she moved across the room. Her face bent over the crib, and Harry looked up at it from a perspective he'd never had before, and she was his, in the absolute way of the only thing you've ever seen that looked back at you and said there you are. She said, I love you more than the sky. I love you more than magic. I love you past the edge of everything and back again. And then she looked up, and something changed in her face, the listening expression of someone who has a very good threat assessment and is using it. She walked toward the door. The memory ended there. Harry came back out of the pensive. He sat with it for a while. He looked at his hands, at the ambient glow, at the meteorite iron wand on the shelf. You are made of love. Not the easy kind. He understood now what she meant. Not the love that stayed safe. The love that walked toward the door. He put the pensive away and went to find Carol. She was in the cockpit, alone, running maintenance diagnostics with the particular focus of someone who wasn't really running maintenance diagnostics. She looked up when he came in. He sat in the co-pilot's seat. I watched it, he said. She waited. She was extraordinary, he said. Dad looked, I couldn't see him clearly but he laughed like, he stopped. Like it was easy. Like laughing was just something that happened to him all the time. You laugh like that, Carol said. He looked at her. Do I? When something catches you off guard. When Monica says something particularly good. Her eyes were on the diagnostic panel but she wasn't reading it. You've always laughed like someone who expects the world to be funny and is mostly right. He was quiet for a while. Stars moved past the viewport at low thrust speed, slow enough to watch individually. I'm going to find Sirius, he said. Not now. After I've started at Hogwarts. But I'm going to find him. Okay. He deserves to know I'm alive. He does. And I want to know him. Whatever that turns out to mean. A pause. Is that, Harry? Her voice was patient and direct. You do not need my permission to know your family. You've never needed my permission for anything that was yours to begin with. He exhaled. I know that. You know that and you asked anyway. I wanted you to, he stopped. Started again. I wanted to say it out loud to you specifically. Carol looked at him then, straight on, and her expression was the one she reserved for things she didn't have language for the view out the viewport on days when the stars were doing something particularly arresting, for the way Monica's laugh filled a room, for the moments when Harry did something so entirely himself that the pride of it was too large for her face to contain properly. Then say it, she said. I'm going to find my godfather, Harry said. I'm going to go to school in Scotland in a castle that is probably objectively dangerous. I'm going to learn the magic that was born in me and whatever that makes me, I'll figure it out as I go. He looked at the stars. And wherever I end up, he stopped. You know. I know, Carol said. You're not, I want you to know that you're not, Harry. I know. Her voice was quiet and certain. You don't have to say it. I want to say it. She waited. You're my mum, he said. Both of them are my mum. That's not a problem I need to solve. It's just true. She looked at the viewport for a moment. Then she reached over and briefly gripped his shoulder, once, firm, the way she'd done since he was small when the gesture said everything that needed saying, and let go. Eat something, she said. You missed dinner. He stood, grinning. On it. And don't fly in the asteroid belt without the suit's gravity compensators. I saw what you did yesterday with the upper field, I had full control, with the compensators, Harry, fine," he left the cockpit laughing. She listened to his footsteps go down the corridor toward the galley, steady and easy, and permitted herself 10 seconds of sitting in the pilot's chair with her face doing whatever it needed to do before she put her expression back on and returned to the diagnostics. The 1st of September arrived the way significant days always arrive, as if the calendar has been building toward it for weeks and the day itself is simply the moment when all that pressure releases at once. King's Cross Station was everything Harry's reading had suggested and slightly more confusing in person. It was large and Victorian and smelled of diesel and stone, and it was packed with the specific frenetic energy of a major hub at rush hour, families with trolleys, students with rucksacks, people moving in every direction with the unified purpose of people who each individually know exactly where they are going, which collectively produces something resembling organized chaos. Harry had a trolley with a trunk. The trunk had every item on the Hogwarts list plus Monica's extra books plus a compartment Carol had fitted with a tiny spatial folding unit so that he could pack 3 times the volume the trunk appeared to contain, which was technically not on the supply list but was also, Carol had pointed out, his trunk and therefore not Hogwarts business. Hedwig was in her cage on the top of the trunk, swiveling her head with the attentive air of a security consultant surveying a new environment. Carol was pushing the trolley, which she was doing at a slightly aggressive pace that Harry suspected was compensatory momentum. Monica had come through the barrier to the magical platform first, by the simple expedient of walking directly at a solid wall with the composure of someone who had walked through stranger things than brick, and had appeared on the other side and looked back through to wave them through with a calm that was entirely performed and slightly wobbly around the edges. Harry pushed through. The platform bloomed around him, the red steam engine, the crowds of robed students and families, the owls and cats and the general orchestral noise of 100 conversations happening at once. The magic was here too, heavier and more specific than Diagon Alley, the gathered energy of hundreds of magical children and their families doing the same thing generations had done before them. He stood on platform 9 3/4 and felt the older energy layer of himself respond to it and breathed it in. "Okay," Carol said, beside him. "Yeah." He looked at the train. "Yeah, I really am." She had his trunk halfway into the luggage compartment before he'd finished the sentence, which was her love language in one action. He helped with the top end and between them it went in neat and square, Hedwig's cage secure on top. They stood on the platform with 8 minutes to departure. Around them, families were doing family things. Hugs, last-minute instructions, the specific teary-eyed performance of parents who had been preparing for this moment all summer and had now discovered that preparation and the moment itself were very different animals. Harry watched a red-haired woman a few feet away wipe her eyes while a tall man with reading glasses and a soft, good-humored face checked a small red-haired boy's ticket for the 3rd time. 4 other red-haired people of varying ages were already on the train, faces at various windows. He looked back at Carol. She was watching him with the specific quality of attention she used when she was memorizing something. "Stop memorizing me," he said. "I'll be back at Christmas." "I'm not memorizing you. You've got your memorizing face." "I have multiple faces and that was not, it was exactly I am simply looking at you in the normal way one person looks at another," Carol said, with great dignity. "Aha." He stepped forward and she met him halfway, the way they always had, and the hug was brief and real and said everything that neither of them were going to say on a crowded train platform in front of people who would neither understand nor need to. She held on for exactly 2 seconds longer than usual and let go. "Check in Sunday," she said. "Sunday," he agreed. "Take the ship through the Perseus Arm, not the Vela corridor. The patrol cycles changed last week." "I know the patrol cycles. You always take the Vela corridor when you're distracted." She pointed at him. "Go to school." He grinned her own grin back at her and turned toward the train. Monica caught him in a hug that lasted longer and made no apologies for it, pressing a folded note into his hand that he didn't read until later, that said, "You are the best thing that happened to the universe this decade. I will fight anyone who says otherwise. Write to me too, not just your mum." He put it in his pocket with the other letters. His collection was growing. Fury shook his hand. actually shook it, formal and brief, which was Fury at his most genuine. "Keep your head," Fury said. "Always. Keep it down," specifically. "Don't," I heard the third-floor corridor briefing. Fury's expression suggested he had not forgotten that Harry had not committed to anything during the third-floor corridor briefing. "You have my communication frequency." "I do. If Dumbledore does anything that, I'll handle it." Fury looked at him for a moment with the specific assessment he'd been applying to Harry since Harry was old enough to be assessed, the calculation that had been running for 11 years and kept arriving at the same conclusion, that the thing in front of him was something the universe had made only once, and that the universe had been right to do so. "I know you will," Fury said. Harry picked up Hedwig's travel cage and boarded the Hogwarts Express. He found an empty compartment near the front of the train and had been sitting in it for approximately 4 minutes, looking out the window at Carol and Monica and Fury on the platform as the train began to move, when the compartment door slid open. The girl who stood in the doorway had a large quantity of brown bushy hair, a prefect's badge that she was clearly not yet entitled to but had probably borrowed to see how it felt, and the expression of someone who has been making a thorough survey of available seating and has arrived at a conclusion through logical analysis. "Is this compartment free?" she asked. "The others are all quite full and this one only has you, and I've already spoken to the twins in the next one who were very amusing but were clearly about to do something that I didn't want to be responsible for witnessing." "Sit down," Harry said, turning from the window. "Please." She sat down across from him and placed her very large bag next to her with the precise movements of someone who has organized the interior of the bag to a specific system. "Hermione Granger," she said. "Harry Danvers Potter." She blinked. It was a quick blink, the blink of someone cross-referencing something internal. "Potter. You're not the Harry Potter?" "I'm a Harry Potter," he said. "Whether I'm the one depends on what you mean by it." She looked at his forehead, at the faint lightning bolt scar partially hidden by his hair, and the cross-referencing clearly resolved. "You are," she said. "Everyone thinks you died when you were a baby but clearly you didn't. You've been somewhere else." She was watching him with frank, undisguised curiosity that wasn't rude because it was so entirely honest. "You don't look like someone who grew up in Britain." "I didn't," Harry said. "I grew up mostly on a ship." "A ship? In space?" A pause. "In space. The woman who found me she has cosmic energy powers. Captain Marvel, if that means anything." Hermione's expression suggested it didn't, specifically, but that she was already planning to research it. "She raised me. I grew up between star systems." He paused, because this was usually the point where people didn't know what to do with the information. "The magic in me merged with her energy type when I was a baby, so I'm a bit different from a standard wizard. I was told to expect that Hogwarts might find me unusual." Hermione Granger looked at him for a long moment with the expression of someone who has waited all summer for school to start and has just discovered that this year was going to exceed all previous years in terms of sheer interesting content. "How does it manifest?" she asked. "The combined energy." "Structurally, does it? You're a Muggleborn," Harry said. She blinked again. "Yes. Is that? No, I'm just, you read everything, didn't you? Before you got here." He looked at the enormous bag. "You've read all of first year and probably some of second already." A slight color in her cheeks. "Most of second. Some of third." A pause. "I like to be prepared." "I've read through to fourth," Harry said pleasantly. "Though I've also been cross-referencing with a Kree military database and some pre-Ptolemaic magical theory texts from a collection Fury, that's my godfather-adjacent person, long story, had digitized from a monastery in Georgia." Hermione's mouth was doing something that was trying very hard not to be a smile but was losing the fight. "You're nothing like I expected," she said. "What did you expect?" "The books say you're famous for surviving a killing curse." "I expected," she considered this honestly. "I don't know. Someone who knew they were famous." I found out 2 weeks ago that I was famous, Harry said. Before that I knew I was the kid who could accidentally make lights go out when he was annoyed and who was very good at asteroid navigation. Can you do magic without a wand? She asked. If you can merge two energy types, yes. I usually use the wand for precision. Without it I can do most things, but the aim is more impressionistic. Impressionistic, Hermione repeated, as if tasting the word and finding it fascinating. The door opened again and the red-haired boy from the platform, the one whose father had checked the ticket 3 times, stuck his head in, took in the two of them, and said, "Is it all right if I," and then registered Harry's face with a reaction that went through surprise, recognition, and a kind of jubilant disbelief in rapid succession. "You're Harry Potter," he said. "So I keep being told," Harry said. "Come in." Ron Weasley came in and took the seat next to Hermione with the energy of someone who was trying to be casual and had forgotten how. He was tall and gangly and had the kind of face that showed everything that happened to it with complete transparency. "Ron Weasley," he said. "I've got 6 brothers and they all told me different things about you being either dead or in hiding, and this is, you're actually here." "Actually here," Harry confirmed. "He grew up in space," Hermione said. Ron stared at Harry. "In space?" "With Captain Marvel," Hermione added, with the air of someone who had already decided to research this comprehensively. Ron looked between them. Is that a person?" "She's extraordinary," Harry said, and meant it in the way he meant all the most important things, completely and without qualification. The train carried them north. Ron ate half the trolley's supply of chocolate frogs and shared them without being asked. Hermione produced a color-coded schedule that she'd made before term had officially started and was either impressive or alarming depending on your perspective, and Harry thought it was both in equal measure and said so, which made her look at him like he'd said something very sensible. Ron's frog cards kept escaping and Harry kept plucking them out of the air without looking, the telekinetic reflex so ingrained it happened before thought, and the third time he did it Ron made a sound that was mostly vowels. "How are you? I grew up in space, right, but the magic is just responsive," Harry said. "It's always on. It doesn't switch off." "That must be brilliant," Ron said, with the total sincerity of someone who means every word. "It's normal to me." Harry considered. "Though I imagine it would be brilliant if it was new." They arrived at Hogsmeade Station in the dark, and the boats on the Black Lake, and the first sight of Hogwarts rising above the hill with every window lit and its towers against the night sky, and Harry looked at it the way he looked at things that earned his full attention, which was to say completely and quietly, all the information he had about this place layered under the direct experience of seeing it, the older energy layer in him doing its deep hum of here, and something else too. Something more specific and personal, this was theirs. James and Lily walked here. This was where they learned to be who they were. "It's beautiful," Hermione said, beside him in the boat, her voice slightly softer than usual. "Yes," Harry said. It was. The sorting was held in the great hall under a ceiling that showed the night sky, enchanted to reflect the actual sky above the castle, which Harry appreciated on a technical level and found privately delightful, and the process of placing a hat on children's heads and having it shout house assignments was, Harry thought, one of the stranger administrative systems he'd encountered, and he'd grown up in institutions run by Nick Fury. He watched his new classmates sorted with the patient attention he gave things he was assessing. Hermione went to Gryffindor before the hat had properly settled on her head, which surprised no one who had spent 6 hours in a train compartment with her. Ron went to Gryffindor to the loudest noise from the red-haired table of what appeared to be his entire family. Then, Potter, Harry. The room did the thing. The wave. The collective held breath. He walked to the stool and sat down and the hat descended over his eyes. The inside of the hat was dark and smelled of old wool and something deeper, something almost magical in its own right, a consciousness centuries layered. "Well," said a voice inside his head. "This is new." "Is it?" Harry thought back, conversationally. "I have sorted 17,412 students," said the sorting hat. I have not sorted one of you. What am I? A pause that felt like the hat reorganizing several categories simultaneously. You are a wizard, it said. But you are also something else. The second thing, another pause. It's old. It predates the school. It predates most things I have reference for. And the third thing, third. Binary energy. The cosmic component. The hat seemed to be experiencing something analogous to mild astonishment. 3 energy types integrated into one human body. Do you have any idea how unusual? Yes, Harry thought. Where do I go? That's the question, isn't it? The hat moved through its deliberation with the thoroughness of its centuries. The mind argues for Ravenclaw. The ambition, not power hunger, but the drive to understand everything, to go everywhere, argues for Slytherin, though it is not the dark variety. The heart argues for Hufflepuff. The courage, a pause. The courage is not reckless, is it? It's not the courage of someone who doesn't calculate risk. It's the courage of someone who calculates every risk perfectly and goes anyway. That's a generous reading, Harry thought. That is an accurate reading. A beat. You asked me where you go. Most students ask what they are. You asked where to go. The hat seemed to find this conclusive. That's Gryffindor. Not the house of the brave, the house of those who act. Who decide and move. All right then. One question, the hat said. What do you want? I want to understand everything, Harry said. And then I want to do something with it. The hat was quiet for a moment that felt like appreciation. Gryffindor, it shouted. The table erupted. Ron was already up, waving. Hermione was clapping with the focused energy of someone clapping at the correct volume and rhythm. The red-haired family table was extremely loud. Harry walked to the Gryffindor table and sat down and looked up at the enchanted ceiling and its perfect stars and felt, for the first time in a day of significant feelings, simply and entirely good. He was in the right place. Not the only right place, the ship was a right place, and deep space was a right place, and his mother's shoulder was a right place, but this, too. This was his. He looked up at the head table. Dumbledore was watching him with an expression of acute attention and something that might have been, under the composed authority of the man's face, pure relief. Harry looked back. Steady, unhurried, entirely comfortable with the contact. Whatever Dumbledore had been waiting 11 years to evaluate, Harry thought, he was going to find the evaluation somewhat different from whatever he'd been expecting. He reached for the food and the feast began. Chapter 4, What Hogwarts Teaches. The first week at Hogwarts was, by any reasonable metric, extraordinary. Harry knew this not because he had a baseline for comparison, he had never attended any school that occupied a building, let alone a castle, but because he could see it clearly in the faces around him. The other first years moved through the corridors with the specific dazzled quality of people whose understanding of what was possible had been recently and substantially revised. Staircases moved. Portraits talked. The ceiling of the great hall cycled through actual weather. A cat that was definitely also sometimes a woman taught them transfiguration with the brisk efficiency of someone who had been doing this long enough to find wonder in the student's wonder rather than in the subject itself. Harry found all of it genuinely interesting and none of it overwhelming, which he suspected made him unusual among the first years and did not particularly trouble him. He'd grown up navigating Kree weapons systems and Skrull political structures and the particular social complexity of a deep space vessel. Enchanted staircases were delightful. They were not challenging. What was challenging, in the interesting way, was the magic itself. His first charms lesson was on a Thursday, conducted by a small round professor named Flitwick who stood on a stack of books to reach the blackboard and moved with the quick, economical energy of someone who had spent a very long time being underestimated and had long since made peace with the advantage this provided. He had them practicing the wand movements for Wingardium Leviosa for the first 40 minutes before attempting the spell itself. Harry sat next to Hermione, which had become the default arrangement after approximately day 2 of sharing every class together, and worked through the wand movement with the focused patience he'd learned from Carol's combat training. Learn the form first, understand it completely, then generate the force. Hermione had it technically correct within 10 minutes, which he'd expected. Ron, across the table, was performing a movement that was enthusiastically committed but imprecise, which kept producing small worrying crackles rather than the intended lift. When Flitwick said, "Attempt the incantation," Harry said the word, felt the magic engage through the wand's dual-core resonance, and the feather in front of him rose, and kept rising, smoothly and steadily, until it was level with the ceiling, which was not what had been demonstrated and was somewhat more than the exercise required. Flitwick blinked. He had remarkable eyes, Flitwick, the eyes of someone who had been watching magic happen for 50 years and still found it worth watching. He looked at the feather, which was rotating gently near the ceiling in a lazy, contented orbit, and then at Harry. "Mr. Danvers Potter," he said. "Could you bring it back down?" "Of course." Harry guided the feather back with a slight adjustment of intent. It settled into his palm like it had been meaning to be there. "How much of your magical education preceded Hogwarts?" Flitwick asked, with genuine curiosity rather than reprimand. "None formally," Harry said. "I've had the energy since birth and it expresses naturally. I've been reading theory for about 3 years." Flitwick nodded slowly, the nod of a man doing rapid recalibration. "Right," he said. "And when you cast the levitation charm just now, what did it feel like from the inside?" The class had gone quiet in the particular way that happened when Harry did something they hadn't expected, which was, Harry was beginning to notice, fairly regularly. He'd stopped being self-conscious about it sometime around day 3. It was simply a data point. "Like opening a door that was already unlocked," he said. The magic was already moving toward the feather. The spell just gave it the right shape. Flitwick looked at him for a long moment with an expression that Harry was learning to recognize in the teachers who paid closest attention, not alarm, not intimidation, but the specific pleasure of someone who loves their subject encountering someone who might love it the same way. "Excellent," Flitwick said, and moved on. Hermione leaned over. "The magic was already moving toward the feather," she repeated, quietly. "Can you explain that?" "After class," Harry said. She nodded, already writing it down. Defense against the dark arts was taught by Professor Quirrell. Harry had read about Quirrell in Hogsmeade from a returning student's perspective: nervous, jumpy, smelled of garlic, wore a purple turban, not particularly inspiring. The description was accurate. Quirrell moved through the classroom with the careful movements of someone navigating a space they were slightly afraid of, and his stammer was real enough but had an intermittent quality, moments where it lapsed entirely before he caught himself and reinstated it. Harry noticed the lapse on the first day. He filed it and said nothing. What he also noticed, and this was the thing that settled at the back of his mind like a stone in still water, was the back of Quirrell's head. The turban sat slightly too deliberately. It moved once, during the lesson, in a way that turbans did not move in still air with no nearby windows open. And when Quirrell turned his back to the class to write something on the board, the older energy layer in Harry's chest did something it had never done in a classroom: it contracted, pulling inward and sharpening, the way it did when something in the surrounding environment was actively hostile. He mentioned this to Hermione and Ron at dinner. "The turban moved," Ron said. He had a drumstick in one hand and was using it to gesticulate. "Turbans don't just, this one did," Harry said. "What's under it?" Hermione asked. "I don't know yet." Harry was eating with the absent-minded efficiency of someone whose attention was mostly elsewhere. "The magic I felt from that direction was dark. Not like accidental magic or residue. Deliberately dark. Structured." He paused. "I've felt dark energy before. There's a particular frequency to it. Whatever is under that turban resonates at that frequency very strongly." Hermione looked at him. "You can sense the frequency of dark magic?" "I can sense magic generally. Dark magic has a specific, it's like the difference between a fire burning cleanly and a fire burning something it shouldn't." He paused. The smell is wrong. What are we going to do about it? Ron asked. Watch, Harry said. Learn more. Not act on incomplete information. Ron pointed the drumstick at him. You sound like someone who's been around military people for too long. That's fair, Harry said. McGonagall's transfiguration class was, unambiguously, Harry's favorite. Not because he was best at it, he was best at charms and reasonably dominant in defense and genuinely excellent at potions in a way that surprised Snape significantly more than it surprised Harry, since potions were essentially applied chemistry and chemistry was something he'd been learning since age 6, but because transfiguration was the subject that most directly engaged the question he'd been asking himself since he was old enough to frame it: what is magic, actually, and how does it work at the molecular level? McGonagall worked through the first-year curriculum with the kind of precision that told you everything about how she thought. She was extraordinarily exacting, demanding the exact right wand movement and the exact right mental image and the exact right spoken incantation simultaneously, and she did not accept a result that was merely close. She had the bearing of someone who had spent 50 years in this castle and had a very clear understanding of which students would go on to do something significant and which wouldn't, and who watched Harry with the same calibrated attention that Flitwick had but with something additional underneath it, something that looked like it might be personal. On the third week, she kept him after class. The other students filtered out. Hermione lingered in the doorway. She did this reflexively, had apparently assigned herself the role of person who hovered in case Harry needed backup, which he found both unnecessary and privately touching, and Harry looked at her and tilted his head toward the corridor in the universal gesture for "Go on, I'm fine." She went. McGonagall stood at her desk and looked at him with the measuring quality of someone choosing their entry point into a conversation. "I knew your parents," she said. Harry had been half expecting something like this, but the directness of it still landed solidly. "Yes," he said. "I thought you might have. Your father was one of the most talented transfiguration students I ever taught," McGonagall said. "Not careful, he had your mother's precision and his own flair, which is a combination that is either magnificent or catastrophic. In his case it was mostly magnificent." A pause. "Your mother was equally gifted, though her strength was charms. Flitwick has been talking about nothing else since your first lesson. He's been very kind about it. He means it." McGonagall seemed to make a decision. "I want to ask you something directly and I'd appreciate a direct answer." "I prefer direct answers," Harry said. "What did Albus Dumbledore say to you when you arrived?" Harry considered the question. "He shook my hand at the welcome feast and said he hoped I was settling in well," he said. "Nothing more." McGonagall's expression moved through several things. "He hasn't spoken to you privately?" "No." A pause that was quite long. "I see." She looked at her desk. "Your file, the file on you that existed before tonight 11 years ago, was classified at the highest level. I was not permitted to see it until last month." Something in the set of her jaw communicated her opinion of this fact without requiring elaboration. "What it contained it contained information that I believe you deserve to know directly rather than through institutional channels." "Fury briefed me," Harry said. "I know about my parents. I know about Voldemort. I know about the prophecy, partially. I know about the night in Godric's Hollow." He paused. "Is there something in the file Fury didn't have?" McGonagall looked at him for a moment. "The Unspeakables have been interested in you for years," she said. "The Department of Mysteries keeps files on magical anomalies. You are their longest-running open file. They call it," she stopped. "They call it the contamination study." Harry was still. "They think my binary energy contaminated my magic. A faction within the department does. They consider the integration of cosmic energy with core magical ability to be an unacceptable deviation from natural magical development. There are 3 members of that faction who have significant political influence in the ministry." She met his eyes. "I am telling you this because I believe you should know who is watching you and why, before they make themselves known to you in a less transparent way. Harry held her gaze. He was doing the thing Carol called his assessment face, the quiet, steady look he wore when he was building a full picture of something. "They think I'm a problem," he said. "They think you're a precedent," McGonagall said. "Which is worse?" He nodded, slowly. "Thank you," he said. "For telling me." "Don't thank me yet." She straightened. "I am also telling you that in 43 years of teaching, I have assessed a great many students' potential. I assess yours as," she paused, with the deliberate care of someone choosing the exactly right word. "Singular. A beat. Don't waste it." Harry felt the older energy hum, warm and quietly pleased, and thought about his mother walking these corridors 20 years ago, being taught by this same woman who was now looking at her son with the same calibrated belief. "I won't," he said. October arrived with rain and wind and the growing understanding among Harry's classmates that he was unusual in ways that went beyond the scar and the famous name. It wasn't that he sought the attention. He genuinely didn't. He'd grown up on a ship where capability was expected and unremarkable, where Carol would sooner compliment his navigation efficiency than his ability to do something impressive, and where the bar for impressive was set by a woman who could punch through a warship's hull. Hogwarts' version of impressive felt different, more personal, more visible, more entangled in the specific social ecosystem of a small enclosed institution. But it kept happening anyway, because Harry couldn't half-do things. It wasn't in his wiring. The flying lesson was the obvious one. Madame Hooch had them approach their broomsticks and command them up, and the brooms came up at varying angles and speeds and one refused to come up at all. Harry's rose to his hand in about 3/4 of a second with the neat precision of something that knew it had found its rightful operator. Then she demonstrated the basic flying position and Harry sat on the broom and the broom recognized, in whatever way magical objects recognize things, that it was carrying someone who flew as a native condition of their existence. It didn't fidget. It didn't pull. It sat in the air with perfect stillness and waited for him to decide what to do. Neville Longbottom, whose broom had a defect or a personality or both, lurched upward before Madame Hooch had given the command, yelped, spun sideways, lost his grip, and dropped his remembrall. The glass ball fell toward the courtyard. Harry was moving before he'd made the decision to move, which was how it always worked. The reflex engaged first and the thought caught up mid-execution. He was off the ground and tracking the arc before the remembrall had fallen 10 feet, the broom responding to his intent with the total immediacy of something that didn't need instructions, and he caught the ball 12 feet from the ground with one hand, standing the broom vertical in a way that wasn't technically possible according to the standard manual but worked perfectly well if you already knew how to fly in a vacuum. He brought it back down, delivered it to Neville, who was white-faced on the ground. "Here," Harry said. "Are you all right?" Neville took the remembrall and stared at him. "That was, you're all right," Harry confirmed, and looked up to find Madame Hooch staring at him and the entire class staring at him, with the collective expression of people who have just seen something recalibrate their understanding of what a person on a broomstick could do. He became the Gryffindor Quidditch seeker 3 days later. Oliver Wood appeared at breakfast with the energy of a man who had been personally blessed by fortune and was concerned it might be a mistake. Harry agreed to play primarily because the game was structurally interesting and he liked the idea of going very fast for sanctioned reasons. Carol's Sunday letter that week said, "Fury told me about the Quidditch thing. He heard from an agent in Hogsmeade. You could have told me yourself. Also, I'm glad you're playing. Your father was apparently very good. Don't get hit by a bludger." He wrote back, "The bludgers would have to catch me first. How's the Perseus arm?" She wrote, "Clear, you were right about the patrol cycles. Show off." He grinned all through breakfast. The thing with Snape happened in late October, 3 days before Halloween. Snape had a specific way of treating Harry in class that Harry had identified early and filed under testing rather than hostility, though the distinction was not always visible from the outside. He asked sharp questions and expected sharper answers and deployed sarcasm with surgical precision towards students who were unprepared or inattentive. He had never caught Harry unprepared or inattentive, which had produced a dynamic in potions class that looked from the outside like armed neutrality and was, Harry suspected, something more complicated. The incident happened at the end of a Thursday lesson. Students were clearing up, and Harry was decanting his completed boil cure potion, which was, without being immodest about it, notably cleaner in color and consistency than the rubric required, because Harry had spent 40 minutes cross-referencing the Cree biochemistry files with the instructions and had found 3 small optimizations, when Snape's robes swept past his bench and stopped. Snape looked at the potion for a moment. He lifted the lid. He replaced it. "You modified the reduction stage," he said. "The standard instructions produce a competent result," Harry said. "The modification produces a better one." A pause. "On what basis did you determine the modification was appropriate?" "Temperature differential analysis. At the standard reduction temperature, the beetle eyes lose approximately 12% of their active component to evaporation. Lower the temperature by 4 degrees and increase the reduction time by 2 minutes and you retain almost all of it." He paused. "The color shift is the result. Brighter means more potent." Snape stood very still in the way he stood still when something had his full attention. The class had gone quiet around them, students in the middle of packing up holding very still in the way of people who had identified something interesting happening and didn't want to disrupt it. "Where did you learn biochemistry?" Snape said. "On a Kree military vessel," Harry said. "And subsequent reading." Another pause. Snape's dark eyes moved to Harry's face with the assessment of someone who was looking for something and not yet decided whether he'd found it. "Decant the full batch," he said. "I'll test it." He did. The results were exactly what Harry had said they would be. 12 points to Gryffindor, Snape said, which was audibly costly for him, and swept away to terrorize someone else. Ron appeared at Harry's elbow. "Did Snape just give Gryffindor 12 points?" "He tested the potion," Harry said. "He never gives us 12, it was a good potion," Harry said, and began packing up with the equanimity of someone who had not done it to impress anyone, which was true, and was therefore not particularly moved by the result one way or the other. Hermione, from his other side, was writing something in her notes that he suspected was a full record of the temperature modification. "Hermione," he said. "It's for my own research," she said, without looking up. "I know. I was going to say I'll write out the full methodology if you want." She looked up. The expression on her face was one he was getting to know well, the one she wore when someone had surprised her in a way she found genuinely pleasing. "Yes," she said. "Please." Dumbledore spoke to him for the first time on November 2nd. Not a summons. Harry would have found a summons interesting but slightly heavy-handed. Instead, Dumbledore was simply present on the 3rd floor landing at 7 in the morning when Harry came back from his early run through the castle's outer corridors, and he was examining a tapestry with the convincing absorption of a man who happened to be there by coincidence, which he wasn't. "Harry," Dumbledore said, without turning. "Good morning." "Professor," Harry said. He slowed but didn't stop, continuing his walking pace down the corridor. If Dumbledore wanted to talk, he would have to walk with him or call him back. Either answer was informative. Dumbledore walked with him. He was a very tall man, Dumbledore, taller than he looked at the head table, and he moved with the ease of someone who had carried a great deal of power for a very long time and had learned to make it look like nothing. He had half-moon spectacles and a long silver beard and eyes that were a very specific shade of blue, not unkind, not calculating, but intensely present in the way of someone who had spent decades listening to people more carefully than they realized. "I've been meaning to speak with you since September," he said. "I wondered when you would," Harry said. A slight pause. "You've been waiting. Observing." Harry kept his pace easy and even. "You know what I am. You've known for longer than you've told anyone at this school, I suspect. You were waiting to see what I'd do when I arrived." He glanced sideways. "What have you concluded?" Dumbledore looked at him with an expression that was, not surprised, Harry thought, but something adjacent to it. The expression of someone who had expected a conversation to take a certain shape and had found the first turn slightly earlier and slightly sharper than anticipated. "I've concluded," Dumbledore said carefully, "that you are very much your mother's son. And perhaps somewhat more of your own creation than either of us anticipated." "That's a generous way of saying you weren't expecting me to already know about the unspeakables," Harry said. A longer pause. "McGonagall told you?" "Yes." Harry looked ahead at the corridor. "She thought I should know." "I think she was right." "She generally is," Dumbledore said, with a warmth that seemed genuine. "I don't disagree with her telling you. But you didn't tell me yourself." "No." He was quiet for a moment. "I have a tendency, which I am aware of and which I regret more than I demonstrate, to manage information about people rather than share it with them. It has served tactical purposes and caused personal harm in roughly equal measure over the years." He paused. "I was going to tell you before the term was out." "I believe you," Harry said. He meant it. He'd thought about Dumbledore at length over the last 2 months, read everything he could find, assessed the available evidence, and arrived at a portrait of a man whose motives were primarily good and whose methods were occasionally catastrophic. A man who loved the world but had a complicated relationship with the individual people in it. "I want to ask you something." "Of course." "The night in Godric's Hollow." "The rift." Harry stopped walking. Dumbledore stopped a pace later and turned to face him. "You knew the rift opened. You knew I didn't die. Did you look for me?" The question sat in the corridor between them. Harry watched Dumbledore's face carefully, not with suspicion, exactly, but with the full attention of someone who would not accept an incomplete answer and would know the difference. "I searched for 2 days," Dumbledore said. "The rift's energy signature was like nothing I had seen. There was no trace on the other side of it, magical tracking charms couldn't follow where you went. After 2 days I could not determine whether you were alive or, I chose to believe you were alive because the alternative was not something I was prepared to accept." He paused. "When no trace emerged over the following years, I began to suspect that whatever force had carried you out had carried you beyond any reach I had. I told myself that you would arrive when you were meant to." He met Harry's eyes. "That was not a fully honest reckoning with my own limitations. It was convenient to frame it as trust in fate." "And was it really trust in fate?" "It was mostly," Dumbledore said, with the honesty of a man who had been thinking about this for 11 years, relief that the decision had been made for me. Harry looked at him for a moment. He thought about Carol on the bridge of the Protector, choosing, fully and without reservation, to be his mother. He thought about Fury's files and Monica's notes and Sirius Black on the outside of a prison looking for a boy no one could find. "All right," Harry said. Dumbledore blinked. "All right?" "You answered honestly." "I can work with honesty." He started walking again. "I want regular access to you this year. Not scheduled. When I have questions, I'll come to you, and I expect real answers. Not managed ones." Dumbledore considered this for a moment that might have held surprise or amusement or both. "That seems fair," he said. "It is fair," Harry said pleasantly. "Also, whatever is in the 3rd-floor corridor, I'd appreciate knowing what it is. Not to go after it. For informational purposes." Dumbledore stopped walking again. "Professor Snape is attempting to steal it," Harry said. "The dark energy coming from Quirrell's turban is the same type as the residue in my scar, which means Voldemort is somehow attached to Quirrell. And whatever is behind that door on the 3rd floor is what they're both after." He paused. "So. What is it?" Dumbledore looked at him for a very long moment in the early morning quiet of the Hogwarts corridor, with the portraits pretending to be asleep in the specific not asleep way of portraits that were paying close attention. "Come to my office this evening," Dumbledore said. 7 o'clock. "I'll be there," Harry said. He resumed his run, easy and steady, the glow under his skin warm in the morning cold, and left Dumbledore standing on the third-floor landing looking after him with an expression that would have been recognizable to anyone who'd spent enough time around Carol Danvers, the expression of someone who had been thoroughly outmaneuvered and found they didn't entirely mind. The Philosopher's Stone, it turned out, was a red stone the size of a large marble that could produce the elixir of life and turn base metals to gold, and it was being kept beneath the castle in a series of enchanted chambers that each required a different skill to navigate, and it was the target of a man who was not entirely a man, a soul fragment of Voldemort, clinging to life in the back of a professor's skull, looking for a body and an immortality tool simultaneously. Dumbledore told him all of this at 7 o'clock, seated across from Harry in his circular office with its whirring silver instruments and its sleeping portraits of old headmasters, and Harry listened with the patient focus he gave intelligence briefings, which this essentially was. The protections were designed as a challenge, Dumbledore said. 7 enchanted chambers. They require logic, skill in several magical disciplines, and some courage to pass. Or the ability to walk through them without engaging any of the protections, Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him. I'm not going to take the stone, Harry said. I'm not planning to go in there tonight. I want to know what we're dealing with before it becomes necessary to deal with it. He met Dumbledore's eyes. But I want to know that if it becomes necessary, I have your confidence to act. You have my confidence to act, Dumbledore said. And then, with the weight of someone saying something they had been thinking about for a very long time, you have always had it. I simply wasn't there to give it earlier. Harry looked at him. Found that he meant it. Filed it in the right place. One more thing, Harry said. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced the notebook he'd been carrying. He opened it to the page headed James and Lily Potter with the 3 items connected by a line and the word mine in the margin. He turned it to face Dumbledore. Sirius Black. I want to contact him. Not through ministry channels. Directly. Dumbledore looked at the notebook page for a long moment. He looked at the 3 connected items and the word in the margin. I'll write to him tonight, he said quietly. Harry closed the notebook and put it away. He looked up at the portraits of the old headmasters, many of them no longer pretending to sleep, and at Fawkes, the Phoenix, on his perch behind Dumbledore's chair, who regarded Harry with bright, ancient eyes and then, with no particular ceremony, opened his beak and sang 4 notes that resonated in the chamber like something had just been settled. The glow under Harry's skin pulsed once in response. Deep, warm, certain. He stood. Thank you, he said. Harry. Dumbledore's voice was quiet. Your mother would have been, I know, Harry said. Not cutting him off, just not needing it finished. He already knew. He'd known since the pensive, since McGonagall, since the way Flitwick talked about her charms work, since every small offered piece of his parents that the people who'd known them had placed in his hands like they were returning something that had always been his. He left the office and walked back through the castle in the late autumn dark, Hogwarts settling around him into its nighttime rhythms, and felt it around him the way he felt the ship around him on good nights, structured and solid and inhabited, a thing made by people who had meant it, full of everything that had happened there and everything that was still to come. He was here. He was entirely, specifically, undeniably here. He took the stairs to the Gryffindor Common Room 3 at a time, pushed open the portrait door, and found Hermione and Ron exactly where he'd expected them, on the hearthrug surrounded by books, Hermione making notes with 3 quills simultaneously in some magic she'd figured out herself and hadn't mentioned to anyone, Ron apparently having fallen asleep on a Transfiguration textbook with his cheek pressing the Standard Book of Spells Grade 1 into his face. Hermione looked up when he came in. She read his expression with the precision she applied to most things and said, quietly, so as not to wake Ron, "Are you all right?" "Yeah," Harry said. He sat down on the hearthrug across from her. "I will be. What are you working on?" She looked at her notes. "Cross-referencing your temperature modification methodology with the theoretical basis in advanced potion making. I found 3 more potential applications." She turned the notes to show him. "Also, Ron fell asleep 2 hours ago and I didn't want to wake him because he looked like he needed it. Harry looked at Ron, face down in the textbook, making small sounds of contentment. He looked at Hermione, who was working at 10 o'clock at night because she had found something interesting and the interesting thing had not yet given her permission to stop. He thought about Carol and Monica and Fury and the ship and the stars and the letters in his pocket and his mother's handwriting and Dumbledore promising to write to Sirius tonight, and he thought that the accumulation of people who meant something, it didn't replace each other. Each one was additional. The universe didn't make you choose. He pulled the notebook out of his pocket and opened it to a new page. "Tell me the applications," he said. Hermione smiled, the real one, the one she didn't bother performing, the one that was just Hermione pleased to be doing what she was doing with someone who wanted to do it too, and began. Chapter 5, The Thing Beneath the Turban. The letter from Sirius Black arrived on a Wednesday. Harry was at breakfast when Hedwig dropped it in front of him, landing briefly on his shoulder before departing with the purposeful air of someone who had been very professional about a very important delivery and deserved credit for it. The envelope was slightly battered, it had clearly come from somewhere that was not close, and the handwriting on the front was the handwriting of a man who had spent 12 years in Azkaban and 2 years rebuilding the muscle memory for ordinary things like holding a quill. Harry turned it over in his hands. Around him the great hall did its morning thing, the rumble of conversation, the scrape of benches, the owls coming and going in the high raftered space above. Hermione, beside him, pretended to be reading her charms notes. Ron, across the table, ate his toast with the focused attention of someone who was absolutely not watching Harry open a letter. He opened it. It was 2 pages, front and back, in that slightly unsteady handwriting. He read it once quickly and then again slowly, which was how he read things that mattered. Sirius Black wrote the way someone spoke when they had been saving up words for a very long time and were now releasing them carefully, aware that too many at once might overwhelm the recipient. He said he'd been looking. He said he knew he had no right to expect anything. He said James had talked about Harry every day from the moment Lily told him she was pregnant, had made Sirius sit through approximately 47 conversations about what kind of person his son was going to be, and Sirius had listened to all 47 because James had been the best person he'd ever known and the conversations made him happy. He said he'd failed Harry's parents and he didn't want to fail Harry. He said, and this was the line Harry read 3 times, "I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that you've been looked for and you've been loved, even from the spaces where you couldn't hear it." He said he was in London. He said he understood if Harry didn't want to meet. He said he'd be wherever Harry needed him to be, whenever Harry decided. Harry folded the letter and put it in his pocket with the others. "Good news?" Ron said. "Yes," Harry said. "I think so." He reached for his pumpkin juice. "How's your switching spell coming?" Ron recognized the topic change as what it was and went with it, which was one of the things Harry liked most about Ron, the ability to read not now and simply not make anything of it. "Terrible," Ron said. "I switched the wrong ends again yesterday and Neville's rabbit spent 20 minutes with a teacup for a head." "Was the rabbit all right?" "Seemed unbothered," Ron said. "More bothered than Neville, honestly." November deepened toward December. The castle was cold in the specific way of very old stone buildings, not merely temperature, but a coolness that had accumulated over centuries and had its own character, its own particular quality of preservation. Frost appeared on the windows of the towers in the mornings. The lake went iron-gray and still. Harry spent his evenings between the library and the Gryffindor common room and the increasingly systematic private study sessions that had become the default architecture of his friendships, him and Hermione working through theory, Ron alternately contributing and falling asleep, which was a ratio that had stabilized and that everyone was comfortable with. He wrote to Carol on Sundays and she wrote back by Tuesday, the letters finding him through Hedwig's spatial anchor regardless of where the protector was. He wrote to Monica separately, as she'd asked. He even, occasionally, wrote to Fury, which Fury clearly found slightly unexpected and responded to with the gruff efficiency of someone who was pleased but unwilling to demonstrate it too visibly. He was happy. Not in a performing happiness way, not in the way of someone telling themselves they were happy to avoid examining whether they were, he was genuinely, straightforwardly happy in the specific way of someone who was doing the right thing in the right place and knew it. Which made the Quirrell situation difficult in a particular way, because it was the one thread he couldn't resolve by simply understanding it better. It wasn't an intellectual problem. It was something moving in the building with him that meant him harm, and it was patient, and it was waiting. He knew what was under the turban by the end of November. He'd been careful about how he gathered the knowledge, not probing directly, nothing that would alert whatever it was. He used the older energy layer's sensitivity to dark magic the way you'd use peripheral vision, not looking straight at a thing but tracking it from the edges, building a picture from fragments. Voldemort. A piece of him. Not a ghost, something more structural than that, a deliberate preservation, a soul fragment attached to Quirrell's body with the specific kind of magic that left a taste like burning wrong things and felt, when it resonated against the scar on Harry's forehead, like the echo of something Harry had been present for and didn't remember. He told Dumbledore in their second private conversation, in early December, stating it plainly. Dumbledore's expression moved through something complicated and then settled. "You're certain?" Dumbledore said. "Yes," Harry said. "The frequency matches the residue on my scar exactly. You can read the residue on your own scar. I can read most energy signatures in my vicinity. The scar is literally part of me, so yes, with particular clarity." He paused. "Quirrell is losing control of the situation. I can feel the dark energy fluctuating, it's stronger at night. Whatever Voldemort is doing to sustain himself through Quirrell is costing Quirrell something significant." "Harry, I'm not going to do anything unilateral," Harry said. "I'm telling you so we can make a decision together." Dumbledore looked at him with the expression that Harry was coming to recognize as the one the headmaster wore when Harry did something that reset his calibrations again. "You are 11 years old," Dumbledore said, not as a rebuke, as a statement of something that clearly struck him with force. "Chronologically," Harry said. "Yes." A pause. "What would you recommend?" Harry leaned back in the chair across from Dumbledore's desk and thought about it with the honest focus of someone who had been thinking about it for 3 weeks and had most of the shape already. "The stone is the immediate problem. Voldemort wants it for a body and immortality, and he'll push Quirrell harder as the year progresses. The protections in the chambers are good, but they're designed to slow a clever thief, not stop a piece of a Dark Lord with nothing to lose." He paused. "I'd recommend moving the stone before he makes an attempt. Take the target away and the situation deflates. And if I'm away when he makes his attempt?" Harry looked at him steadily. "Then I'll handle it." "Harry. What's in those chambers is not first-year curriculum, with respect," Harry said, "my curriculum is somewhat non-standard." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment that contained a great deal. Then, with the honesty Harry had come to rely on from him, "I may be called away in December. There is a ministry matter I cannot avoid." He looked at Harry. "I had intended to be here. I want you to know that I had intended to be here." "I know," Harry said. "That's why I'm telling you now. So we can plan properly and not reactively." They stayed for another hour. When Harry left, the night was full and cold, and the corridor outside Dumbledore's office was lit by torches that threw warm shadows against the stone. Fawkes had sung him out again, those 4 notes, resonant and settling, and Harry walked back through the castle feeling the building around him, its old magic, its centuries of people walking the same stones, and thought, "I'll protect it." Not the stone specifically. The place. The people in it. The same instinct that had made him dismantle the attacking Kree ship at age 9, clean and precise, without being asked. The Quidditch match against Slytherin in early December was the first time Harry went fully binary in front of the Hogwarts population. He hadn't planned it. He never planned it. Full binary was something that happened when the circumstances called for something at the full edge of his capability, and a Quidditch match in theory didn't qualify. In theory. In practice, the Slytherin Seeker, Flint's cousin, a broad-shouldered 6th year named Marcus Avery, who had been watching Harry's playing style for weeks with the focused attention of someone planning something, had arranged for both bludgers to be tampered with. Not in any way the referees could catch. Just slightly, their tracking charms recalibrated to focus on a single target. Both bludgers, for the whole match, locked exclusively on Harry. He figured this out around the 4-minute mark, when the first bludger caught him across the shoulder hard enough to spin him sideways on the broom and the second one was already in the air coming from the other direction. He did a spiral that took him between them at 60 miles per hour, which worked, and then had to do another one when they turned around, and after about 8 minutes of this the conclusion was clear. He could either spend the whole match dodging bludgers and hope to still catch the snitch before losing too much altitude or stamina, or he could change the terms. He changed the terms. He went straight up. Full speed, straight vertical, until the castle below him was a gray rectangle and the crowd in the stands was a blur of color and sound, and the two bludgers were behind him and below him and coming fast. At the top of his trajectory, at the exact peak, where the broom's upward momentum met the natural ceiling of useful altitude, he stopped. He turned the broom to face downward. The binary energy came up fully and cleanly, the way it always did when he gave it space and permission, and the older energy layer came with it, and together they were the white gold that had no official classification in any magical or cosmic energy database. He sat on the broom 200 feet above Hogwarts in that light, both hands free, tracking the two incoming bludgers with the same precision he'd used on the attacking ship's shield frequency at age 9. He let them get close. Let them get very close. The crowd below made a sound that contained panic, and then he flicked both hands outward, a small, almost dismissive gesture, and the bludgers stopped dead in the air. They hung there. Motionless. Every person in the stands could see them. Then Harry rotated his wrists slightly and the bludgers turned, slowly and deliberately, toward the two Slytherin beaters who had been positioning them throughout the match. They began moving in that direction at about half the speed they'd been moving before, not to injure, just to make the point crystal clear, and the beaters dove off their brooms to get out of the way, which worked, and the bludgers chased them off the pitch and then settled back into normal bludger behavior as if nothing had happened. Harry was already diving for the snitch by the time anyone in the stands had processed what they'd just watched. He caught it at 10 feet off the ground, pulled up smooth, and landed. The crowd was making a noise that was less cheer and more collective stunned exhalation. Oliver would found him first. Oliver's expression cycled through shock, delight, tactical reassessment, and deeply competitive satisfaction in about 3 seconds. Those were both bludgers, tampered with, Harry said. Someone recalibrated their tracking charms. You stopped them with your bare hands. Not quite bare. He was still holding the snitch, which he offered to the referee. We should file a formal complaint about the bludger modification. Madam Hooch should look at them before they're used in another match. Oliver stared at him. You've just done something I've never seen in 20 years of watching Quidditch and your first instinct is to file a complaint. The instinct before that was to win the match, Harry said. Which I did. The complaint is just good process. Ron appeared at a dead sprint from across the pitch. Harry. You grabbed the bludgers with you were glowing, mate, the whole stadium could see it, I know. That was the most brilliant thing I have ever. Hermione is writing it all down, she was taking notes during the match, I know she was. You're not even, you just won and you're not even, I'm very pleased we won, Harry said, with genuine warmth. I'm hungry. Is there food at the celebration? Ron stared at him. I love that you're like this, he said. It's so strange and it's so good. December was 3 days from Christmas when the thing happened. Harry had been down to the third-floor corridor twice, not to enter the chambers, just to stand outside the locked door and listen, building a picture of the energy patterns beyond it, understanding the rhythm. He went at 2 in the morning the second time and found the door slightly ajar. He stood in the corridor and looked at the open door. He went back to bed, woke Hermione and Ron with the lack of ceremony that characterized his urgent situations, and was back at the door with both of them within 20 minutes. The door is open, Hermione said, in the voice she used when she was keeping her anxiety very organized. I noticed, Harry said. Someone's already in there, Ron said. Someone's either already in there or they went in and came back out, Harry said. I don't know which yet. He turned to them. You two can go back. Absolutely not, Hermione said. Not a chance, Ron said. Harry looked at them both. He was not surprised. He had not actually expected either answer to be different. Stay close, he said. They went in. The first chamber was the devil's snare and Hermione had it dealt with before Harry had fully assessed it, a blast of warm light from her wand, clean and immediate, the plant recoiling from the warmth. She did it without drama, without needing acknowledgement, just the precise application of the right knowledge. Harry noted, not for the first time and not for the last, that Hermione Granger was extraordinary. The second chamber was the winged keys. Ron spotted the right one faster than either of them, pointing from the ground with the instinct of someone who had spent his whole life surrounded by moving magical objects. Harry was in the air and had it in 3 seconds, which was less a chase and more an interception, and he let himself enjoy the flying for exactly as long as it took to get the key in the door. The chess game in the third chamber was Ron's. Harry saw it happen in real time and it was one of those moments that fixed itself permanently in memory, Ron stepping onto the board with the complete composure of someone who has thought about chess the way Harry had thought about navigation, who saw the whole board always and not just the immediate pieces, who said, I know what to do, with quiet certainty and then did it, sacrificing himself with such clean tactical intelligence that Harry stood watching it and felt something fierce and uncomplicated. This person is remarkable and I am lucky to know him. Go, Ron said, from the fallen chess pieces square, slightly shaken but intact. Go on. Ron, I'm fine. I'll be fine. Go. Harry and Hermione went. The troll was already unconscious on the other side of the door, which told Harry that whoever was ahead of them had been here recently and had dealt with it. He moved quickly. The potion puzzle in the sixth chamber, Hermione had the logic solved in the time it would have taken most people to read the riddle. She handed him the correct bottle. This will only get you through to the next chamber, she said. There isn't enough for both of us. I know. He took the bottle. Go back to Ron. Get him out and go to Dumbledore. Harry, Hermione. He met her eyes. Not urgently, not dramatically. Just directly, with the full attention he gave things that mattered. I need you to do this part. I need you both safe and I need Dumbledore here. That's not the lesser role, that's the critical one. He paused. Trust me. She looked at him for a moment with those sharp, honest eyes that didn't miss anything and never pretended to. Then she nodded, once, the decisive nod of someone who has weighed the argument and found it sound. Don't do anything that can't be undone, she said. I'll be careful, he said. That is not the same thing and you know it, she said, but she was already turning back, and Harry drank the bottle and stepped through the black fire. The seventh chamber was large and mirrored. The stone sat on a pedestal at the far end, small and ordinary looking and absolutely the thing everyone was here for. Quirrell stood in front of it with his back to Harry, and the turban was off. The back of Quirrell's head had a face on it. Harry had known. He had known for weeks, had built the full picture from partial information, had been entirely intellectually prepared for exactly this. He stood in the chamber and looked at the face of the man who had tried to kill him as an infant and felt, not fear. Fear was not the thing in him right now. The thing in him was clear and cold and very focused, the way it was before any confrontation that mattered. Voldemort's face on the back of Quirrell's head opened its eyes. Harry Potter, it said. Not theatrically, with genuine interest, the kind of interest that had an edge of something that might, in a being of greater emotional range, have been called unease. I have been waiting to meet you again. You met me when I was 14 months old, Harry said. I don't remember it. No. But your body does. The eyes moved over him with assessment. I can see what you've become. What you carry. A pause. The light in you is, I had not anticipated this. My curse should have left a mark. Not a gift. It did leave a mark, Harry said, touching the scar. The gift came separately. Quirrell turned around. His face was hollow and wrong, the face of a man who had been hosting something that was consuming him, and his eyes had the look of someone who was still in there but very far back. He raised his hand and made a gesture that cast a spell, a binding, standard restraint magic, and Harry took a half-step sideways and let it pass him, which was less a deflection and more simply not being where it was aimed. The stone, Voldemort said, through Quirrell's mouth now. Give me the stone, Harry. I won't pretend you have to. I know you don't have to. But consider, what I'm offering. You're not offering anything, Harry said. You're stalling. A pause. You've already assessed that you can't simply take the stone from the pedestal, Harry said. Dumbledore's final protection, the Mirror of Erist. It only reveals the stone to someone who wants to find it, not use it. You've been standing here trying to work around that for the last, he looked at Quirrell's feet, at the marks on the floor, 20 minutes. You can see the stone in the mirror but you can't get it out. And you can't make Quirrell want to find it without using it, because that's not what Quirrell wants. The face on the back of Quirrell's head was very still. You've read more than Dumbledore expected, it said. Most people read less than Dumbledore expects, Harry said. The bar is set for 11-year-olds who just arrived. I could kill you, Voldemort said. Conversationally, which was more disturbing than theatrical would have been. Quirrell can still cast. The killing curse requires no physical instrument. You could try, Harry said. You tried once. The energy in me now includes a direct component of the same curse you used, it merged with my magic during the rebound, and that's before we discussed the binary element. He took a step forward. Not aggressive. Purposeful. You'll feel it if you want. I'll show you. He let the binary energy rise, not all the way, not full white, just enough. Just the warm gold-white glow visible through his skin, steady and enormous, and the older energy underneath it coming forward with it, the ancient earth magic and the cosmic light together, and the mirror at the far end of the chamber reflected it in a way that mirrors didn't usually reflect light, multiplied it, like the mirror understood what it was seeing and wanted to show more of it. Quirrell flinched. The face on his head did not flinch, but its eyes changed. You are afraid, Harry said, not unkindly. I thought you might be. The magic you used on me, you can feel what it became. You recognize it. What I feel, Voldemort said, and his voice had something in it now that Harry thought was the closest thing to honesty the man was capable of, is that I made something I cannot predict. That is not something I accept. Most important things aren't predictable, Harry said. He was moving as he spoke, not toward Quirrell but toward the mirror, a slight angle that crossed the line between Quirrell and the pedestal. You put something in motion 11 years ago and it went somewhere you didn't intend. That's not a problem I can solve for you. And it's not something I'm going to let you try to correct. Quirrell lunged. Not a spell, a physical lunge, throwing himself at Harry with the desperate force of a man whose internal passenger had decided that close range was the better tactical option, and Harry caught him by the arms and the contact was wrong. Not for Harry. For Quirrell. The binary energy didn't burn Harry. It never burned Harry. But it apparently burned whatever Quirrell was carrying with a thoroughness that went well beyond standard magical repulsion, because the sound Quirrell made was not the sound of someone in pain from normal magical causes. It was the sound of a host body whose parasite was dying. Harry let go immediately. He stepped back. Quirrell dropped to his knees, and the face on the back of his head was screaming with a fury that had nothing of Quirrell in it, and the mirror was blazing with reflected light, and the stone had fallen from the mirror's frame onto the floor. Harry picked it up. It was warm. It sat in his palm and glowed faintly red and he looked at it for one moment, this small, impossible object, the end point of so much wanting and so much harm, and then put it in his pocket. He looked at Quirrell on the floor. The man was shaking, pale, his eyes blinking in and out of focus. The dark energy Harry had been tracking for months was fragmenting, losing coherence, the soul fragment pulling itself loose from Quirrell's body with the frantic urgency of something trying to survive. "Quirrell," Harry said. "Can you hear me?" Quirrell's eyes found him. Genuine eyes, the look of a man who had been somewhere else for a long time and was briefly, painfully, back. I can't," his voice was his own, not Voldemort's borrowed version of it. "I know," Harry said. He crouched down. "I'm going to make sure you get help. But I need you to fight it for another few minutes. Whatever it's asking you to do right now, don't do it." He met Quirrell's eyes. "You're still here. Use that." Quirrell stared at him with the expression of someone encountering unexpected mercy and not knowing what to do with it. The dark energy, the Voldemort fragment, gave up on Quirrell then. Harry felt it happen, felt the cold rush of something evacuating, and watched the fragment lift from Quirrell's body in a form that wasn't quite physical but was absolutely visible to anything sensitive to magical energy, a shadow wrong-shaped, a distortion in the air, a wrongness looking for somewhere to go. It passed through Harry. Harry had thought, in the minutes before, about what he would do if this happened. He had arrived at a conclusion based on the same logic he'd applied at 9 years old to an attacking ship: don't kill, neutralize. Contain the threat without making it a martyr. He let it pass through him. Let the binary energy and the old earth magic and the specific frequency of the killing curse rebound that lived in his scar receive it, not absorb it, not destroy it, but examine it in the half-second of contact and understand it and then send it away, the way you sent away things that belonged somewhere else. Not into Quirrell. Not into the castle. Into the mirror. The mirror of Erist, which showed people their deepest desire, which showed Voldemort a body and immortality, and which Harry pointed the fragment toward with the simple logic that if you showed a thing what it wanted and made the wanting unreachable, it would go looking somewhere else entirely. Somewhere very far from here. The mirror blazed white. The fragment hit it and was reflected outward, not destroyed, Harry didn't think, because he wasn't sure you could destroy a soul piece with clean conscience, but dispersed, scattered, stripped of its specific coherence and sent into the void where it would take years to reassemble itself if it ever did. The mirror cracked. Then it settled. The chamber was quiet. Harry stood in it for a moment with the stone in his pocket and Quirrell unconscious on the floor and the cracked mirror at the far end reflecting nothing in particular, and felt fine. Entirely, straightforwardly fine. Steady on his feet, energy systems normal, no drain, no injury. The confrontation had taken exactly as long as it needed to and gone exactly as well as careful preparation could make it go. He checked Quirrell's pulse. Present, stable. He sat down on the floor of the chamber, leaned against the wall, and waited for Dumbledore. Dumbledore came through the black fire 14 minutes later with McGonagall and 2 other professors. He looked at Quirrell on the floor, at Harry seated against the wall, at the cracked mirror, at the absolute quiet of the chamber. He looked at Harry for a long moment. "The stone," he said. Harry reached into his pocket and held it out. Dumbledore took it. He closed his hand around it and stood for a moment with his eyes closed and the expression of someone who has been dreading one specific catastrophe for long enough that its non-occurrence requires a moment to fully land. "The fragment," he said. "Dispersed," Harry said. "Through the mirror. It'll take years to reassemble, if it manages." He paused. "Quirrell needs medical attention. He was a host for a long time. There'll be damage." McGonagall had already moved to Quirrell, wand out, running diagnostic charms with the brisk efficiency of someone who had handled medical emergencies in this castle for 40 years. She met Harry's eyes briefly over Quirrell's prone form with an expression that was too compact and complex to be a single emotion. Dumbledore sat down on the floor. Not in a chair. On the floor, beside Harry, in the way of someone who has been standing for a very long time and has found unexpectedly that they don't need to be standing right now. He looked at the cracked mirror. He looked at the stone in his hand. He said nothing for a while. "I should have been here," he said. "You knew I could handle it," Harry said. That is not the same as it being appropriate to ask you to. I know, Harry said. But it worked out. He paused. You trusted me. That mattered. Dumbledore looked at him sidelong. In the quiet of the chamber, with the torchlight low and Quirrell being tended to across the room and the mirror standing still with its crack running end to end, Albus Dumbledore looked about 100 years old and slightly but genuinely undone. Your mother, he said, would have done exactly this. She would have read everything, understood more than she was supposed to, prepared for every contingency, and then sat on the floor of the crisis and waited for everyone else to catch up. You've said that twice now, Harry said. I'll likely keep saying it. It keeps being accurate. He looked at the stone. I'm going to destroy it. Nicholas will understand. It's the right thing. Yes, Harry said. You agree. Immortality from an external object isn't real immortality. It's dependency. The thing keeping Voldemort alive is also the thing keeping him on a leash. He paused. Remove the leash and he'll come back on his own terms eventually, but he'll have to rebuild from nothing. That's better odds than a stone that could be stolen again. Dumbledore looked at him. Have you considered a career in magical strategy? I've considered most careers, Harry said. I'm 11. I'm not committed to anything yet. A sound from across the chamber, McGonagall, steady and professional, looking up from Quirrell to confirm he was stable. Dumbledore nodded once to her and then back to the corridor, and she and the two other professors moved Quirrell carefully out through the black flame. Harry stood. His legs were fine. Everything was fine. He took one last look at the chamber, the cracked mirror, the pedestal, the evidence of what had happened here, and turned toward the exit. Harry, Dumbledore said. He stopped. Thank you, Dumbledore said. Simply. Without the weight of strategy or management. Just, thank you. Harry looked at him. Found the old man genuine, and found that it mattered. Tell Hermione and Ron I'm alright before you tell anyone else, Harry said. They'll be worrying. He went back through the black fire, through the blue, through the chess pieces, Ron's chess pieces, still sitting exactly where Ron had placed them, through the winged keys, through the devil's snare, and out into the corridor, and then up through the castle to the hospital wing where he found Hermione and Ron sitting side by side in the chairs outside Madame Pomfrey's door with matching expressions of controlled anxiety that broke into something much less controlled the moment they saw him. Ron stood up so fast his chair fell over. Hermione said his name in the specific voice she used when something had been frightening her and was now over. Harry sat down between them and said, It's done. Everyone's all right. I'll explain everything. And he did. Chapter 6, Light years from home. The end of term came the way the end of significant things always comes, not with a single conclusive moment but with a gradual accumulation of lasts. The last charms lesson. The last Tuesday dinner in the Great Hall. The last time walking the third-floor corridor, which was sealed now, the chambers beyond it empty, the mirror gone, the whole architecture of that particular crisis dismantled and repurposed into history. Harry moved through those final days with the specific quality of attention he gave things he wanted to keep, not nostalgic exactly, because nostalgia required a distance he didn't yet have, but present in the way of someone who understood that paying attention was how you kept things. The school knew what had happened, or knew a version of it. Rumor had a way of filling in gaps with whatever the existing cultural framework made most sensible, and Hogwarts' cultural framework was well supplied with legends about Harry Potter and what he might be capable of. The story that circulated, Professor Quirrell had been possessed, Harry had stopped him, Voldemort had been driven off, was accurate in its broad strokes and missing most of what made it interesting, which was fine. Harry didn't need people to understand the precise mechanism. He needed them to be safe. What he did not expect was Dumbledore's announcement at the end of year feast. The Great Hall was full and warm and decorated in Gryffindor's colors after the House Cup announcement, which had already produced a noise from the Gryffindor table that Ron had described as the best sound he'd ever heard, and Dumbledore had stood at the head table with his usual calm and said, clearly and without preamble, that Harry James Danvers Potter had acted with extraordinary courage and intelligence in the face of a genuine threat to the school, and that Hogwarts was fortunate to have him. No other details. No spectacle. Just the plain acknowledgement, stated once. The response was not the wave of recognition thing that happened when people processed Harry's name and history. It was different, more direct, more earned, the sound a room makes when it is acknowledging something it has actually witnessed. The Gryffindor table was on its feet. Half the Ravenclaw table stood too. Even a row of Hufflepuffs. Harry sat and let it happen and found he was genuinely moved by it, which surprised him slightly. Not the noise was just noise. But the standing. The specific decision people made to stand. He looked at Hermione beside him, who was clapping with her usual precise energy and whose eyes were bright, and at Ron on his other side, who was making a noise that was not quite a word, and thought about what it meant to be witnessed by people who had actually been present. He thought about Carol, who would hear about this eventually through Fury's channels or through his Sunday letter, and who would read it and say something dry and specific that communicated pride without using the word. He stood and thanked the room, briefly, and sat back down, and the feast resumed. The train home from Hogwarts was a different animal from the train to Hogwarts. The journey north in September had been full of the specific tension of the unknown, new people, new place, the accumulated weight of all the things Harry had just learned about his origins and what they meant. The journey south in December carried a different feeling. Looser. The knowledge of a place now internalized, a social geography established, the shape of the year ahead already visible. Harry sat in the same compartment he'd sat in on the way up, between Hermione and Ron, and the conversation moved the way it did when people were comfortable with each other, jumping topics, doubling back, someone asleep at irregular intervals, the thread picked up without ceremony when they woke. Neville Longbottom joined them for the second half of the journey. He had spent most of the term being quietly present in Harry's peripheral awareness, good-natured, frequently flustered, significantly more capable than he gave himself credit for, possessed of an earnest tenacity that Harry recognized and respected. He sat across from them and ate a large quantity of Bertie Bott's every flavor beans with the focused determination of someone who was going to find a good one eventually. "Are you coming back next year?" Neville asked Harry, at some point around Birmingham. "Yes," Harry said. Neville nodded, satisfied, and ate a bean that turned out to be pepper. "Good," he said, eyes watering. "Why wouldn't he come back?" Ron said. "I don't know." Neville looked at Harry with the guileless honesty of someone who was simply describing their thought process. "You seem like someone who has a lot of options. I wanted to know if Hogwarts was one you were keeping." Harry looked at him. "Hogwarts is one I'm keeping," he said. Neville smiled the smile of someone whose earnestness had just been treated as the asset it was. "Brilliant," he said, and tried another bean. Hermione, who had been writing in her journal with the focused intensity of someone completing a task before a self-imposed deadline, looked up. "I've been cross-referencing the Philosopher's Stone situation against the broader context of dark wizard activity since Voldemort's first defeat," she said, to no one specifically. "The pattern of Ministry documentation shows 3 significant coverage gaps in the early 80s, each coinciding with, 'Are you listening, Ron?'" "I'm listening," Ron said. He was not entirely awake but he was making a reasonable effort. The coverage gaps coincide with documented cases of Voldemort supporters avoiding prosecution through political pressure. Which means there are probably still significant numbers of people in positions of authority who were aligned with him and were never held accountable. She looked at Harry. "That creates a specific set of risks for next year and subsequent years." "I know," Harry said. "I'm making a list." "Of course you are. It's a very good list. I used color coding." "Show me after London," Harry said. She went back to her journal with the air of someone who has been validated appropriately and is returning to work. Ron was fully asleep by the time they reached London. Harry watched him go and thought about the chess game, Ron on the board, sacrificing himself with quiet certainty, the purest expression of what Ron actually was underneath the easy humor and the middle child diffidence. He thought about Hermione in the potion chamber, logic puzzles solved in 4 minutes, handing him the right answer without needing to be the one who used it. He thought about Neville asking if Harry was coming back, simple and direct, the question of someone who wanted to know whether the people he valued were going to stay. He thought, this is mine too. This specific collection of people. The train pulled into King's Cross. The platform was its September self but inverted, the energy of arrival rather than departure, the specific release of an institution coming apart at the seams for a few weeks to let its people disperse. Families came through the barrier in clusters, the red-haired Weasley family appearing in a cheerful organized chaos that included Mrs. Weasley hugging each child with the specific ferocity of a woman who had been counting down the days and wanted everyone to know it. Harry came through the barrier with Hedwig's cage in one hand and his trunk rolling behind him and stopped on the other side of the barrier and looked up. Carol was standing 20 feet away. She was in civilian clothes, the dark jeans and jacket she wore when she was trying not to be Captain Marvel for an afternoon, and she was holding a coffee from one of the station shops, and she was watching the barrier with the particular quality of attention she used for things she cared about. When he came through she didn't move immediately. She let the moment exist for one beat. Then she crossed the distance and he crossed the other half and she put her arms around him in the brief, real, unreserved way she had when it mattered. "You're not supposed to be here until tomorrow," Harry said into her jacket. "I got here early." "How early?" "Yesterday." He pulled back and looked at her. She was examining him in the methodical way, face, hands, posture, the standard inventory of someone checking for damage that hadn't been reported. "I told you I was fine," he said. "You tell me lots of things," Carol said. "I like to verify." He looked at her steadily. She looked back. The coffee in her hand was half finished and there were slight shadows under her eyes that told him she had either been traveling across several time zones very recently or had been sleeping badly since his last letter and was not going to admit to the second option. "You were worried," he said. "I'm always slightly worried." "You're 11. 12 next month." 12, she amended. You went up against a piece of Voldemort, Harry. I prepared for it thoroughly." "I know you prepared for it thoroughly." "That's not," she stopped. Breathed. Looked at the station ceiling briefly, which he recognized as her version of gathering herself. "I know you were ready. I know it went right. I know you are standing in front of me completely uninjured and clearly entirely fine." She looked back at him. "I was still worried." "I know," he said. "Thank you for telling me instead of pretending you weren't." She tilted her head slightly, the way she did when he said something that landed differently than she'd expected. "Since when are you the one telling me to be honest about feelings?" "I've always been the one doing that," Harry said. "You just don't notice because I'm subtle about it." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. "You are many things. Subtle is not among them." Ron appeared beside Harry with the impeccable timing of someone who had not been listening and also absolutely had. "Hi," he said. "I'm Ron Weasley." "You must be." He looked at Carol and the part of his brain that recognized significant person clearly engaged. "You're actually Captain Marvel." "In civilian clothes," Carol said. "But you're actually, Ron," Harry said. "Right. Sorry. Hi." Ron stuck out his hand and Carol shook it with the gravity she gave handshakes from people who deserved it, which was most people when she paid attention. "Harry talks about you. Constantly. Not in an annoying way. Just, constantly." "I gathered," Carol said. She glanced at Harry with an expression that was doing its level best to be neutral and wasn't quite managing it. Harry looked at the ceiling. Mrs. Weasley appeared at Ron's elbow, took in Carol with the quick assessment of a woman who had raised 7 children and could process new information about the people around them very efficiently, and said, "You'll be Harry's mother." She said it with the warmth of someone who had decided to be warm before the conversation started. "Molly Weasley." Carol Danvers, Carol said. Ron has told us quite a lot about Harry. We're very glad he's found good friends. She looked at Harry with the specific warmth of someone who has adopted a child emotionally and is not asking permission for it. You'll come to the Burrow this summer if you'd like. You'd be very welcome. Harry felt the invitation land with the warmth of something genuinely meant. I'd like that, he said. Thank you. Mrs. Weasley beamed and moved Ron along with the practiced efficiency of a woman who had been moving children along for 20 years. Ron waved over his shoulder. Harry waved back. Hermione found them a few minutes later with her parents, a tall man and a woman with the same quality of focused attention that Hermione had, clearly the source of it, both of them looking at Harry with the interest of people who had heard a great deal and were now doing the primary research. Mr. and Mrs. Granger, Harry said. It's good to meet you. We've heard quite a lot about you, Hermione's mother said. Hermione mentioned you cross-referenced her potion work, her father said. She was very pleased. She does remarkable work, Harry said, with complete sincerity. Hermione went slightly pink in a way that she would deny later, and introduced Carol with the slightly formal precision of someone who understood they were introducing two significant people to each other and wanted to get it right. Carol and Hermione's mother talked for 3 minutes about nothing in particular while their children watched and reached independent conclusions about each other from what they saw. When the Grangers had moved on and it was just Harry and Carol on the thinning platform, Carol finished her coffee, looked at the departure board, and said, Monica is waiting at the hotel. Fury says he'll be there for dinner but he'll probably be there at the hotel already. Is he pretending he's not eager to hear the debrief? He filed 3 separate requests to be sent the after-action report, Carol said. I told him you'd tell him in person. A pause. He accepted this, which means he wanted the in-person version anyway. Harry got his trunk moving. Hedwig ruffled her feathers and settled. The unspeakables, Harry said, as they walked. Did Fury get more information? Some. Carol's tone shifted slightly, the tone she used when she had information she was going to share and was deciding how to frame it. The faction leader is a man named Croaker. He's been with the Department of Mysteries for 30 years. He's not stupid, his concern about your energy integration is genuinely theoretical, not personal malice. She paused. But he has ministry connections that could create problems, and he's been pushing for a formal classification of your magic as a controlled anomaly. She glanced at Harry. That's the ministry's way of saying they want oversight rights. Oversight rights meaning? Meaning they'd want to monitor your magic use, potentially limit certain expressions of it, and have legal authority to intervene if they decided something you did constituted a threat to magical stability. She said it levelly. Fury is watching it. McGonagall has apparently been pushing back through official channels. Dumbledore has been doing Dumbledore things, which means we don't know exactly what he's doing but it seems to be working. Harry walked through King's Cross beside her and turned this over. He didn't feel alarmed. He felt the clear-eyed way he felt about any opposition with defined motivations and predictable vectors of approach. Croaker was wrong, the integration of binary energy and earth magic was not contamination, was not instability, was not a threat to magical structure, but wrong in a way that came from incomplete information rather than malice, which meant there was a path to resolving it that didn't require a confrontation. The path required demonstrating, over time, that the integration was not only stable but generative. That what he was made the practice of magic richer, not poorer. That he was not a contamination study but a proof of concept. He was going to do it by being very good at magic for several years in a place where people could see it, and letting the evidence accumulate. He was 11 years old. He had time. I'll write Croaker a letter, Harry said. Carol looked at him. You want to write to the head of the faction that wants to control your magic. I want to open a dialogue. You can't counter misinformation by ignoring the person generating it. You counter it by engaging directly. He paused. I'll be polite. I'll be specific. I'll invite him to state his concerns formally so I can address them. Another pause. Fury can advise on tone. Carol considered this for several steps. Fury is going to love being asked to advise on tone, she said. I know. She almost smiled. He could see the almost from the side. You're going to be an enormous headache for every government and institution you ever interact with, she said. In the most precise, documented, entirely well-reasoned way possible. That's the plan, Harry agreed. The hotel was a good one. Fury booked good hotels, it was one of his few consistent indulgences, and Monica was in the lobby when they arrived, sitting in a chair with a book open on her knee and her feet tucked up under her in the way that suggested she'd been there long enough to get comfortable. She looked up when Harry came through the doors and stood up and said, "Little star," in the warm specific voice she'd always had for him, and hugged him with the length and sincerity she'd always hugged him with, and then held him at arm's length and looked at him in the direct way she had. "You went binary plus in front of the whole school," she said. The Quidditch situation required a response. "You stopped two bludgers in midair in front of a stadium. They were tampered with." Harry. She was grinning. "It was the right thing to do. I just want you to know I have heard every single detail from Fury's report and I want to hear them all again from you." "After food," Harry said. "I haven't eaten since the train." "After food," she agreed, and let him go. Fury was, as Carol had predicted, already at the hotel and had organized dinner to be in one of the private dining rooms, which was partly discretion and mostly Fury's preference for controlled environments during information exchange. He looked at Harry when he came in with the particular look, not paternal, Fury wasn't that, but something adjacent to it, something that had been developing over 12 years of watching Harry become what he was. Something like, "I knew it would be you." "Debrief," Fury said. "Hello to you too," Harry said. "Hello." "Debrief." "He needs food first," Carol said. "There is food," Fury gestured at the table, which did indeed have food on it. "It's right there." "Sit down, Nick," Monica said. Fury sat down. Harry sat across from him and pulled the food toward himself and began eating with the focused efficiency of someone who had not been eating adequately and was correcting this, and in between bites he told Fury everything, not in the polished, sequenced order of a formal debrief, but in the real order, the order things had actually happened and mattered, with the details that didn't make it into reports and the moments that did. He told them about Quirrell's turban moving. About the sensing of dark energy frequency. About his conversations with Dumbledore, the 3-month building of a complete picture. About the chess game and Ron's face and the decision. About the potion chamber and Hermione's logic and the expression she'd worn when she handed him the bottle and said "Trust me" back without words. About the stone cold and small in his palm. About the mirror blazing white. He told them about sitting on the floor of the 7th chamber and waiting for Dumbledore, which was maybe the part that mattered most in a way that was hard to articulate. "You waited for him," Carol said. "He needed to be there," Harry said. It wasn't about needing backup. It was, he'd been managing this situation alone for years. He needed to see the end of it. He needed it to be resolved in front of him. A pause. "I could have left. The stone was in my pocket, the threat was neutralized, nothing required me to stay. But the right thing was to wait." Carol looked at him across the table. He met her eyes and saw the thing he'd been seeing in her face all day, the thing that had been in her voice on the phone through the term whenever something significant had happened, the specific quality of someone watching a person they love be exactly who they hoped they'd be. Exactly who she knew they would be, not because she'd made them into something, but because she'd given what was already there the space to become itself. "The stone is destroyed," Fury said. "Dumbledore is destroying it. It was his decision and the right one." Harry paused. "He'll do it. You're sure?" "He looked at it the way people look at things they've already decided about," Harry said. "He's done." Monica was leaning forward with her elbows on the table, the way she leaned when she was fully engaged. "The Voldemort fragment. You dispersed it into the mirror. Into the void beyond the mirror. The mirror of erased reflects desire, I used that. Pointed the fragment at what it wanted and made the wanting a direction rather than a destination. He paused. It'll take years to reassemble, if it does. He'll come back eventually. I don't think the dispersal was permanent. He'll come back, Fury said. Not a question. His intelligence background was already running the projections. Yes, Harry said. But not this year and not from a position of strength. He'll rebuild from nothing, which means slowly, which means we have time to prepare. He met Fury's eye. We should use it. Fury nodded. The nod of a man who had already decided this and was glad the relevant person agreed. They ate. The conversation moved the way it moved when all of them were in the same room, through several threads simultaneously, doubling back, the shorthand of people who knew each other well enough not to need connective tissue in the sentences. Monica asked about Hermione and Harry described her with the specificity he applied to people he respected, methodical, precise, more emotionally perceptive than her presentation suggested, capable of holding a logical framework and a caring instinct simultaneously without one compromising the other. He described Ron, the chess game, the sacrifice, the particular courage of someone who wasn't born expecting to be brave but found it anyway when it was needed. I want to visit them, Monica said. At some point. Meet them properly. Mrs. Weasley has already invited me for the summer, Harry said. She has? Carol said. I may have made a reasonable impression. You saved the school, Monica said. I solved a specific problem in the school, Harry said. I'd prefer to be known for that rather than for surviving something at 14 months that I have no memory of. He paused. Hogwarts knows the second thing. I'd like the first thing to get some traction. It will, Hermione's voice said, in his memory, from the compartment on the train, you're not what the books describe. The books describe someone who happened to survive. I'm going to write better books. He'd told her he thought that was an excellent use of her clearly considerable abilities. She'd accepted this as the natural response to a natural plan. Serious, Fury said. Harry looked at him. His response to Dumbledore's letter arrived 2 days ago, Fury said. I have it here. He slid an envelope across the table. I thought you'd want to read it in person. Harry took it. He didn't open it immediately, he held it the way he'd held his mother's letter in Gringotts, for a moment, weighing it. Then he opened it. Sirius Black's second letter was longer than the first. It was still the handwriting of someone rebuilding the ordinary mechanics of written expression, but less careful this time, faster, more itself, less managed. He said he'd heard what happened at Hogwarts from Dumbledore and he needed Harry to know that James would have been, and there was a line scratched out here, several attempts at the sentence, all crossed through, until finally, James would have been incandescent. In the best possible way. The absolute best. He said he understood Harry had a family. Had a mother, had people who were his in every sense that counted. He wasn't asking to replace any of that. He was asking, if Harry wanted, to be something additional. An uncle, maybe. The kind who showed up at Christmas and told stories about your father that no one else would tell. He said he was in Edinburgh. He said he would be wherever Harry wanted. He said, take your time. I've got nothing but time and I intend to use it much better than I have been. Harry put the letter in his pocket with the others. His collection was the size of a small archive now. He was going to need a better system. I'm going to see him, Harry said. I know, Carol said. Before I go back to Hogwarts. In the summer. He looked at her. I want you there. She looked back. Not because I need backup, he said. Because he was my dad's best friend and I want him to know my mum. Carol was quiet for a moment in the way she was quiet when something had landed somewhere it was going to stay. All right, she said. We'll all go, Monica said. Because Monica was Monica and the idea of not being included had clearly not occurred to her. Edinburgh is lovely in summer. I've never been to Edinburgh, Fury said. You'll come, Monica said. I wasn't, Nick. Monica looked at him with the calm patience of someone who had known him for 20 years. You'll come. Fury looked at his coffee. Edinburgh is fine, he said. They had 2 days before Carol had to go back. There was a situation developing in the outer sectors that Sword needed Captain Marvel for and which couldn't wait, which was the permanent condition of Carol's life, the thing that never changed regardless of what was happening on the personal side. Harry had made peace with this the way he'd made peace with everything that was genuinely true about his circumstances, not reluctantly, not by suppressing the feelings, but by deciding it was what it was and that what it was fine. The second morning they woke early and went to the Thames because Harry had read about it and wanted to see it, and the 4 of them walked along the embankment in the grey December cold while London did its thing around them, early commuters, the occasional tourist, a man selling hot chestnuts from a cart that Monica stopped at because she was constitutionally unable to pass a food vendor without investigating. Harry walked beside Carol along the river and she was quiet in the comfortable way, the way that didn't need filling. Next year, he said. Next year, she agreed. It'll get harder. Voldemort is going to rebuild. Whatever he does next will be more direct than possessing a nervous professor. I know. The unspeakable situation needs managing. I know that too. And there are things at Hogwarts that I haven't gotten to the bottom of yet. He paused. There's a Chamber of Secrets referenced in Hogwarts, a history that Hermione says is a persistent legend with enough historical specificity to be more than a legend. And something in the way Malfoy talks about Slytherin suggests he knows more about it than he's saying. Carol looked at him sideways. You've already started the next year's problem. I like to be prepared. You and Hermione. He smiled at the river. She's very good, Mom. I know. I read your letters. She paused. All of them. Every week. I know you do. You could call. Letters feel more, they feel like the right form for this place, he said. He tried to articulate it. Hogwarts has a quality to it. Like it exists in a slightly different time as well as a slightly different space. Letters fit that better than calls. She considered this. That's either very perceptive or very romantic, she said. Can be both. It can be both, she agreed. Monica caught up to them with a paper bag of chestnuts that she distributed without ceremony. Fury accepted his with the dignity of a man eating chestnuts from a paper bag on the Thames embankment as if this were a deliberate and considered choice. They walked until the morning was fully itself and London was fully awake around them, and then they found breakfast at a place that had been there long enough that the coffee machine was more familiar than modern and the eggs were done exactly right, and they sat around a small table and talked about nothing in particular for an hour. King's Cross the second time was different from King's Cross the first time in all the ways that mattered. Carol had her bag over one shoulder and was doing her deliberately not memorizing face, which he clocked immediately, and he let it go because she was entitled to look at him however she needed to on a train platform in December. Monica had already given him a new notebook, this one with a deep blue cover and his initials on the front in her handwriting, because she had found a stationer on the embankment and had not been able to resist. Fury had shaken his hand again. And then, your letters, Fury said. Harry looked at him. They're good, Fury said. Your observation is good. Your analysis is accurate. A pause. Keep writing them. I will, Harry said. He turned to Carol. She looked at him in the full way, the way she'd looked at him from the beginning, in a medical bay on a starship when he'd been 14 months old and had grabbed her finger and refused to let go. The way she'd looked at him when he was 3 and a model ship had done a barrel roll on command. The way she'd looked at him at 9, full binary and blazing, after he'd neutralized an attacking ship and come back down and said easy like he meant it. The way she'd looked at him for 12 years as he'd grown into someone she hadn't known she was going to love this much and had loved completely anyway. You know what I'm going to say, she said. Check in Sunday, he said. Take the Perseus arm, not Vela. Don't get hit by a bludger. Don't get hit by a bludger, she confirmed. And the third floor equivalent at next year's school, whatever it is, he said, I'll tell you before I go in. She looked at him steadily. You'll tell me while you're planning it. I'll tell you while I'm planning it, he agreed, because that was fair and he meant it. She put her hand on his face briefly, just a second, just the warm familiar weight of it, and said nothing, and let him go. He walked toward the barrier. He stopped once and looked back, which was not something he usually did, but this platform was this platform and these were these people, and some moments wanted a full stop before the next thing began. Fury with his coffee. Monica with her blue-covered notebook. Carol with her carefully not memorizing face doing its best work. He looked at them and they looked at him and he thought, this is what it means to belong somewhere. Not to a place. To people. And I belong to so many, across so many kinds of distance, and I am not divided by any of it. He thought, I am made of love. Not the easy kind. He thought, I know. He turned back and walked through the barrier. Platform 9 3/4 was exactly as it had been in September, the red engine, the steam, the sound of 300 people doing the particular work of departure. He found Hermione and Ron in their usual compartment because of course he did, because Hermione had arrived early and secured it with the premeditated efficiency of someone who had identified the optimal compartment in September and had no intention of losing it in December. You're late, Hermione said, though he wasn't. I was saying goodbye, he said. Ron looked up from a chess set he had already arranged on the fold-down table between them, apparently working out a specific problem. How are they? Good, Harry said. He put Hedwig's cage up and settled in. Carol sends her best. She didn't actually say that, Hermione said. She said it in the way she says things without saying them, Harry said. It counts. Hermione considered this and apparently found it logically sound. Fair. The train began to move. London passed the windows, the backs of buildings, the tangle of tracks, the slow opening outward as the city gave way to the edges of itself and then to the fields beyond. Grey December sky and bare trees and the particular English winter light that Harry was beginning to find familiar in the way you find things familiar when you've paid close enough attention to them. He opened Monica's notebook to the first blank page. Ron watched him. What are you writing? Everything, Harry said. He wrote, December. King's Cross to Hogwarts, second time. He wrote, Chamber of Secrets, follow up with Hermione, cross-reference historical accounts. He wrote, Croker letter, draft before January. He wrote, Sirius, Edinburgh, summer. He drew the line connecting all of it, the way he always did, and wrote in the margin beside the line, mine. He wrote, Year 2. Then he looked up at his friends, Ron frowning at his chess problem with total earnest absorption, Hermione already 2 pages into a book she was reading for the 3rd time, and at the window where the world was expanding around them, getting larger and greener and stranger with every mile, and at Hedwig swiveling her amber eyes toward him with the attentive calm of something that knew exactly where it was going. He breathed in. Somewhere above, past the clouds, past the atmosphere, past the belt of asteroids and the enormous patient dark, Carol was flying. The Protector's drives were warm and the Perseus arm was clear and she was going wherever she was going with the absolute certainty she always had, the certainty she'd taught him, not by telling, but by being. He was a child of stars and earth both. He was going home. He was already there.